So we could all start rubbing our hands together, bringing this awareness, bringing this heart-centered presence and energy into our hands now, keeping the eyes closed, being present with this energy that you are accumulating in the palms of your hands, the tips of your fingers. Start to bring it a little bit faster, a little bit more energy. Feel that heat almost to the point of being unbearable, and then bring it into the chest, thumbs against the sternum, arms parallel to the ground, nice and straight, shoulders relaxed. We're going to take a nice deep inhalation and exhalation together, and then we are going to chant 5 mantras of Aum. So first, let's take a deep inhalation from the root to the crown. Suspend briefly at the top. And release. And now we will all be reverberating the vibration of Aum, A-U-M, the vibration of creation, to allow ourselves to be in tune with the elemental forces that allow this information to be integrated with more ease and grace. And with the power of this final Aum, may all beings everywhere be liberated from the veil of samsara. Take a deep, full inhalation, filling up the stomach and holding it at the top. Gently create tension in the Mula Bandha, raising the life force energy up the spine. Feel this surging of life force. And slowly releasing the breath back into the roots. Thank you, ancestors. Thank you, Adashi Adepts, Ascended Masters, Source Consciousness, all aspects of the divine, feminine, masculine, God, Goddess, Absolute Consciousness. Thank you for this opportunity to come together for the purpose of co-creation, for the purpose of exchanging energy, information, presence, love, life force. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for receiving, for being open, for taking a step in alignment with your heart path. Let's begin. Some people are joining this masterclass and already have like a really great understanding of kind of like what it's going to be generally about. And some people just saw some of my stories and were like, yo, this looks cool. Let me just, hop in here. So in an essential nutshell, I inspired this masterclass off of a book series that many people follow on my page may be familiar with, called Anastasia and the Ringing Cedars of Russia. And this is basically going through a lot of the content of this book series while giving my perspectives, my interpretations, and comparing it to information from other stories, and just basically giving a roundabout interpretation of these texts, which essentially give a whole new perspective on the creation story, the purpose of humanity, where humanity came from, and many different perspectives that we'll get into. We got a little overview here. We're going to be going over essentially the creation of Earth, life in the beginning of Earth, the fall from Eden, so to speak, I dubbed it as, and then the ancient Vedic culture, including their wedding rituals, their child raising techniques, divine nutrition, and ancient aloha spirit, I kind of called it, which is like their ethics, their merit, their basically a crimeless society. And then gets into then the occult priesthood, why we see the world the way it is today, and then a little bit about how to compromise with that, the solution to that, a little something called the Book of Kin, and then we'll get into the importance of speed of thought as a human being, as a conscious sentience, and then we'll get into the final juice of all of it, which kind of wraps all this together, which is family domains. And so I prepared some stuff for this masterclass, but to be truthful, I'm only book 7 out of book 9, so I've been reading these books for months now and really been absorbing it and stuff like that. And I was actually gonna wait until I finished all the books, interpreted all of it, have all my highlights and stuff, but I wanted to do this little masterclass before I move and stuff like that. So that's why I'm giving the part 1 almost to this entire masterclass. But you can definitely expect in the coming weeks or months, when I do move and such, when I do finish the books, this is going to be like a complete, even more put together of this. So if you like what you see here, it's going to be more flushed out in the future. So that's about all the explanation. And the first thing I'm going to kind of go into is the creation story. I mean, where do we start besides the creation of the universe and such? And the biggest thing that I want to emphasize here is I am not a believer of anything, including these teachings. I don't stand behind or not stand behind anything. I'm just a role to be the channel. This information is things that are peace and love, sister, blessings. Glad you made it right on time. Just getting started. And this is a version of the creation story that is slightly different from the Bible, is slightly different from all the ancient religions, is slightly different from even the esoteric texts like the Sumerian tablets and even like Christic physics. I've been studying this stuff for years, and this is like a very different perspective. So I'm not saying this is the right one, I'm not saying this is the wrong one, I'm saying I've been looking a lot and I haven't seen this anywhere else. So I'm presenting it for all of y'all to make your own discernment, make your own conclusions as to these claims, this information and stuff like that. So really allow your intuition to guide you towards truth, and don't just listen to what I say or these books or anything like that, because, you know, keep your mind open to everything, but don't like stay and cling on to anything at the same time. So that being said, I have a little bit of I took a bit of notes on like I compiled the creation story, which is like chapters on chapters in book 4 of this stuff. They go into the creation story, and I kind of like made a synopsis, made a summary of it to kind of like spare y'all. I'm gonna be reading some things from the book, certain parts that I highlighted. We'll read like, you know, have a little story reading time at some point, but I just wanted to kind of like brush up on the creation story. So creation in a nutshell, supposedly from the information of these texts, state that before there was matter, there was unmanifest, diverse energies all around the universe. So there was the potential for matter, energy, everything. You know, the potential energy existed within everything. But in our universe, I'm not talking about all of existence, in our universe, before there was matter, there was all these diverse energies, different polarities. They all had a lot of different frequencies to them. They had like conflicting masculine and feminine energies still in a not exactly proportionate ratio. So it was just a lot of like chaos, just a lot of like potential for everything, but manifestation of like pretty much nothing at the very beginning. And then within this energy, these unmanifest energies, the elements required for life began to think and create in the dark. This was possible through the feeling of aspiration present within these diverse energies. So supposedly, the elements that were required for life, all of the different moving parts, energetically, physically, all those different dimensions that go towards creating life, those aspects of existence started to think on their own. It was just complete blackness. There was no light. There was no anything yet. It was just complete darkness and silence. And within that darkness and silence, supposedly through the energy of aspiration, the feeling, the emotion, those are all just different words for energy that you're experiencing through you. The emotion or the energetic frequency of aspiration supposedly is what brought these elements to have the drive to create something from what seems like, from the limited perspective, nothing. And so eventually the potential energy of aspiration amassed the momentum to suddenly and entirely initiate the very first communication, which was its desire for co-creation and joy for all from its contemplation. I'm actually going to write this one down right here, because this is kind of like the main meat of like these texts here. They call it the divine dream. The divine dream, and I'll write it here again, is conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation. So the reason I'm like, writing this down and all that stuff is because, like, thinking about it as, just taking into consideration all this information, obviously, going into that, seeing this as essentially the desire behind what we can only call God, as to why existence kind of is instead of isn't. So from this statement, conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation. People talk about the meaning of life, the purpose of life. What's your purpose? Kind of that, and then if you really look at that sentence and look at your passion, look at your purpose, look at whatever it is that you feel, if you already know obviously what your passion is, what you feel called to do, what your drive is intrinsically, like, tell me it doesn't fit under conjoint creation. And conjoint creation here is us as a conduit of the divine conjointly co-creating with the divine. Because as we'll also get into, I'm just going to use the word God or source or all consciousness. They're all synonyms here, It's just a label to understand these things. The divine can only create in co-creation. Like, for example, if humanity goes to a place in the wilderness where they create a little settlement for themselves, but they don't work with the elements to basically take care of and maintain the land, the property, the fruits, the vegetables, the herbs, the plants, the animals, every single aspect to a living paradise. If humans don't play their role in maintaining that, plants will start to die out, harvests will start to lessen. It's through the human factor that God source consciousness reaches its fullest potential. Obviously, source God is able to still do humans have been lazy, still the earth isn't nothing, but for it to be the paradise that it originally was, the fullest potential of what living life on this planet is capable of achieving, that requires conjoint creation. Humans and source working together. And this even works through all of the elements of nature. Plants, animals, insects, air, the elements, literally. All of these things are manifestations of God, of source consciousness. Anything that is living is a direct emanation of source. So working with all of those things, like, it may not just be specifically through meditation and calling out to source in that way. It could also be like working with animals. Like, in ancient times, we'll get into the relationship with animals, like bears, wolves, eagles, squirrels. Everything was like their pets and like their partners. Before bears would go into hibernation, they would bring acorns to the humans so that they would be fed. The squirrels would get nuts and even like take off the nuts and like peel them for the humans. All these different things. That's working with source, working with the divine, all aspects of it. So conjoint creation, working with nature, working with the divine source consciousness, and joy for all from its contemplation. So the way that they say when you find your life purpose is the way that you truly know that it's your life purpose or what you came here to do is two main things. One, it fills you with an intrinsic, meaning an internal drive. It fills you with an internal inspiration and drive of happiness within yourself, right? It invokes radiant emotions and feelings and a state of being within yourself. And then the second thing is that it also has that effect on others. Whatever your purpose is, if it benefits others, chances are that's what you came here to do. But if you're saying that your passion is something like, you know, let's say someone in the street, like, yo, my passion is drug dealing, yo, like, that's my thing, you know, that's my background. I've heard many people say these things to me, and then, like, if you're selling people things that are hurting them, and it's like, you know, it's inflicting detriment onto someone in the long run, and he, you know, not just the short term, like in the long run, if you're like providing more detriment than benefit to somebody, chances are that's like a superficial, egoic, pleasurable activity rather than your God-given passion and stuff like that. So whatever you do that brings you joy is going to bring joy to all in its contemplation. They'll think about your creations, and they'll feel light, they'll feel positive and radiant and stuff like that, because it's as above so below. What you're feeling, they're feeling. So that's kind of like the divine dream, like I said, they call it. So back to creation story. So like I said, there was unmanifest diverse energies all around the universe, and within this energy, the elements required for life began to think and create in the dark and the silence. This was possible through the feelings of aspiration present within each diverse energy, and then eventually the potential energy of aspiration, dreaming for something greater, amassed to the momentum to suddenly and entirely initiate the first communication, which was its desire for the divine dream, conjoint creation, joy for all, from its contemplation. And so, important thing to note here is that the energy complex that, like I said, we can only associate with the name as God, just to understand it, its form resembled that of humanity's second form, or really our first form, our astral form, the subtle body. Most people here know as the physical, the physiological, atomical body, and then you have the astral body, the energetic counterpart to that. And most people, you know, they have different names for it and all the different religions and whatnot, but generally speaking, you have this energy part of yourself as well as the physical part of yourself. And it even gets more complex than that, like the causal body, you know, things like that. But generally speaking, that's what this is referring to. So this energy consciousness, you could say, from all of the diverse energies of the universe, felt enough aspiration for this divine dream to make a communication to the other energies in the universe. And so, how would one bring to the whole universe birth? A birth in which all particles of the universe will be included. So basically, from this aspiration, source all God consciousness was like, okay, how can I do this divine dream? Like, what is that? Okay, it came through, like, this feels, this is right. I know this is right. You know, let me go along this train of thinking over here. How can I do this? And the answer was birth. And so, you know, a birth in which all particles of the universe, positive, negative, creation, destruction, were all integrated and included. And that was the human, basically. So, to unite all particles, well, they didn't create humans first, but to create all particles would mean to also unite that which is destructive, which is all destructive, with that which is all constructive. This is done through bringing opposing forms of energy into alignment, balancing them with oneself, and using that energy to unify all of the universe's diverse energies. So, what that means is, in order to unite that which is all destructive and all constructive, the two energy polarities of existence, you have to first integrate both polarities within yourself. And then from that integration within yourself, you are now able to unite them externally. And let me just, cool. So yeah, you have to integrate it within yourself, and then you're able to integrate it without yourself, outside of yourself. And so that's supposedly what this collective of energies that we know as God essentially did. And mind you, just a little something here is, in Christic physics, this is also like kind of parallels very closely as well. It discusses the operation of the Merkaba very similarly. By unifying the masculine and feminine energy fields, we are able to utilize the light body in any dimension. So, you know, in my past master classes and stuff, you know, you have the top of the six-sided star that's like a energy vortex spinning clockwise up into the cosmos, into the cosmic center. That's the masculine energy. And then you also simultaneously have the bottom of the six-sided star. That's a counterclockwise spiral of energy that's siphoning into and connecting with the core of the earth. And that's bringing feminine energy into alignment. So this is just basic anatomy of the energy body, is unifying masculine and feminine elements within ourselves to be able to be an integrated whole, not be predominantly in one or the other, because there isn't, it's not like masculine is light is positive, negative, the feminine is, there's no good or bad. It's just they're both the same, just different sides of the same coin. So you need both of them to be truly you. If you're on either side of the spectrum, you're outside of your center, and you're therefore going to be acting in a way that's not truly how your soul or your higher self just wants to exist. And so the energy of doubt will also attempt to destroy and decoy those who take upon such a task. But when doubt is equal with confidence, they will facilitate exactitude and beatitude for future creations. So the thing about this is, like I said, this is talking about our universe, but not existence as a whole, because existence in life is way beyond just our universe. There's multiverses. It's pretty, infinite. It's ineffable. We can't understand through scale how big it all is. But that being said, although this consciousness that we're referring to as source, God, consciousness, whatever, was kind of the creator and the only thing that existed in this universe, there was still sentiences outside of our universe that actually were able to communicate with God, so to speak. So they were watching all of the events that were happening in this universe. And at this point in the story, supposedly, when Source God Consciousness made the decision, yo, I'm going to do this divine dream, I'm going to create birth, and I'm going to do that by unifying all of the elements of creation within myself, just me, just God. I'm going to do it all myself, just warrior this shit, and create the universe. When these outside consciousnesses got word of that, and they just telepathically, omnipresently were able to just watch that, they communicated with this source all God consciousness, and they kind of said I don't know if that's a great idea, you know what I'm saying? That's a lot for one being, no matter how powerful and all powerful, that's a whole universe, bro, that's a lot. And so they kind of basically proposed, they said, the energy of doubt will attempt to decoy and destroy those who take upon such a task. And then Source God All Consciousness replied, but when doubt is equal with confidence, they will facilitate exactitude and beatitude, which means exactitude being exact and beatitude being beautiful. So it's precise and beautiful for future co-creations. So Source was I got this. Y'all are talking about your doubt. Fuck your doubt. I'm we're everything. Come on. Let's just create over here. So God literally balanced the doubt with the confidence and created. And at this moment, all of the universe's diverse energies then all at once released themselves onto this energy whom we may call God. Thus began a great struggle between all energies in the universe, each endeavoring to gain supremacy over the rest. So basically, when Source God Consciousness basically was yo, I got my confidence balanced with my doubt. Let's pretty much like Thanos birthed this, made the decision within a moment, and then in that one moment, all of the energies of the universe just went and just all released themselves onto this one energy. And so there was it's who knows how long that period was. The book doesn't even specify that, but you could only imagine creation time here. It could even be billions of years or millions or even thousands, but there was a great period before anything was created of just chaos and just everything coming all at once, and then the period of the actual great work of integrating it all into once. Yeah, you could have all the energies integrated within yourself, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a cakewalk all the time. It's still intense energies, especially, that's unfathomable to think, so all of the energies, you know, because basically if you see it like this, even if, you know, source was integrated, all of the other diverse energies usually weren't. So these unintegrated diverse energies would come into source, and then source would then integrate them and help them alchemize. It's almost like a yogi. It's a very common story of a yogi or a Kriya master or something like that that comes into this plane karmaless, no karma on this slate, or if they had any, very little, and they clear it before, you know, they get to an older age. And then when they have all these disciples, they'll be completely clear karma, and then they would sometimes, like, the disciples wouldn't ask. I mean, maybe they would, but usually the masters would intuitively take on other people's karmic burdens and then work through it within themselves to alleviate them of it, because they are a master and they're able to do it. But there's still going to be that time period to where they're doing it, to where they're integrating it and moving the energy and alchemizing it. So this kind of played the same part within the universe. So it was a very large, you could basically imagine source was like, you know, I've done the work, I've integrated the masculine and feminine, all that, but then all these other entities and energies that didn't, got, you know, it'd be like, okay, let's figure this out, figure this out, figure this out, integrate this, alchemize that, transmute this, transmute that, and then eventually, like I said, who knows how long this period of great struggle lasted, but eventually calm returned only when this thought gleamed in each one's consciousness, that nothing could be higher or stronger than the one energy of the universe, the energy of aspirations of the divine dream. So when the prevailing thought within each, and like basically what powered through any consciousness in this great struggle, like they just like faded everything out, like nothing is more powerful than the divine dream. Like that energy of aspiration that started this whole story, it was the most predominant thought within their consciousness. And that field of energy is what allowed them to persevere that time period of universal cataclysm. You know, it's just crazy thinking about that. And so, yeah, that's when each thought was predominantly that. And then in this calm, Source God consciousness silently in the darkness of the unfathomable universe put into motion every system of interrelationships with speed on a measureless scale. So basically, you know, he was like moment of birth, all the intense energies, that great period of alchemization, struggle, conflict, all that just turbulence, and then eventually when the divine dream's single-handed significance was the prevailing thought in everything's consciousness, calm returned. And so God is like, all right, you know, I'm kind of like blank slate again, you know, it's all, everything's ready, you know, everything's ready, let's get the show started. It's like when you're doing an event or something like that, you buy a bunch of stuff for it, you get like little tables, little knickknacks, little decorations, whatever, you have it all ready, and then it's like, you know, today's the day, let's get it all set up, you know what I mean? It's like, he was spending all this time, like, getting everything, like, visualizing it, just getting everything ready, and then it was like, you know, he got a blank slate, everything's here for him to create, he's like, put that there, put that there, put that there, and that's the period that, you know, it was basically at, was after this whole calm, it was like, all right, now I can actually go forth with this divine creation. And so supposedly, yeah, he went on creating for, and by the way, they mention God in the book with the pronoun he, but they actually do go in the book series to describe that that's not saying the masculine. They have a whole reason for it that you can find in the books, but it basically talks about humanity as the man and the woman. Like the girl Anastasia, she calls herself, she's like, I am not some superpowered, I'm man, but she's a woman, you know, she's like, I am man, I'm not a man, I am man. So like they're not talking about it as like the, you know, the gender when they say he. They're just talking about like, you know, how humanity is the emanation of source, essentially. Just to clear that up, if I ever do mention God as a he, because some of the notes in the books, they refer to it like that. I'm not going to always correct it, because I personally just say source. But and so after source laid down this foundation, this creation plan, so to speak, started fulfilling it, started to create stars, create galaxies, create Actually, no, this was before matter still. This is when energy was still being understood. And then God is going around and creating things energetically in the subtler realms than the density of matter. And then eventually it became unsustainable for all of the universe's energy to be released upon one being, the spirit of the divine dream, and not letting in the spirit of the divine dream and not wanting to let its creations down was essentially what kept Source going. For a while it was like creating, and it really was doing it all on its own. And then at this point they say in the book as well, those outside consciousnesses that said the thing about doubt, they were like, bro, you're gonna explode. Like, you can't hold all of this. Like, you gotta, like, stop this little fantasy of yours, and instead of exploding and blowing everything up and fucking it all up, you gotta, like, slowly start to release your energy so that you don't explode and destroy everything. And then Source is like, for me to do that would be to give up on all of this, literally. Like, no. Like, I have a purpose here. This is the dream. I am not going to do that. And it was from that aspiration that it kept going, right? And then here, it was the energy of love and inspiration that filled God with a new kind of power. The universe resounded with new sounds. What was empty space began to resonate with grace. So that's a little bit, basically, essentially what happened here, as, basically quoting specifically from the books. They say, Source was in that state. He's like, nah, I'm not giving up. I'm doing this thing. And then in that space, still like alone in darkness, because matter hadn't been created yet. Things were getting created, but not in matter yet. That's when Source started to feel a warm, gentle touch. Something unfamiliar. This thing is the whole universe. It knows everything in the universe. It's like, this is unfamiliar. What is this? This warm, loving, compassionate energy. And it literally was the spirit of love, is what this book says. It was a consciousness, a sentient energy that calls itself, I am the energy of love and inspiration. And that energy infused itself with Source, and basically, like it said right here, it was the energy of love and inspiration. Filled God with a new kind of power. The universe resounded with new sounds, and what was empty space began to radiate with grace. So it started to give life to the aspects to where there was none, and it started to bring a radiance to the universe. And it, most importantly, gave Source the drive to keep going, because he was really in over his head in a lot of ways, but still knew he had it at the same time. But so the energy of love warded off the cold darkness of the void surrounding Source, encompassing God in its warmth, because basically, like, he was just alone in the silence and darkness. Just, it was like, come on, I'm lonely. Goodness, you're the only thing that exists, and you exist. You create everything, like, so this gave Source, God, like, company, basically, as, like, it's this all-powerful consciousness, like, still wants some company, for goodness sakes. So it starts to fill the darkness of the void surrounding Source and encompassing God in its warmth. This granted them a huge boost in inspiration, and things began to accelerate at an unprecedented rate. And this is what eventually supposedly led to the creation of Earth and humanity and matter. So it says here that with the creation of Earth, which supposedly, this is where the story starts to get, like, pretty interesting. Because it pretty much says that we are at the center of the universe, or were at the beginning. Like, back in the, they talk about the scientists like Galileo and stuff, they would talk about the heliocentric and the, peace and love, my brother. It would talk about, being at the center of the universe now. Oh, that's silly, what I'm saying? Look at the solar systems and stuff. What this supposedly says is, not supposedly speaking right now, but at the very first creation of matter, supposedly, was the energy and the creation of Earth. Earth was the very first planet of matter, supposedly, within this little narrative. And so Earth was the first physical creation in our universe. Prior to it, nobody and nothing possessed visible matter. The sun, moon, and stars, everything was created to be self-sustaining from the start. So the whole solar system and the interrelationship between the planetary bodies that keep the Earth into its equilibrium, all was created from the start to be self-sustaining, and was essentially what, Source God, all consciousness interpreted and understood to its best to be perfect. It was like, I'm just gonna do it all right the first time, so I ain't gotta keep improving it and maintaining it like most of humans' creations. Like, you got technology, you gotta get a new phone every 5 years or something, and so after the Earth was created, God created human form to experience the utopia that has been created. As it goes, you create this whole Eden, this whole self-sustaining paradise, all the birds, all the animals, all the life, all the water, all the elements, all the insects, and then it's like, all right, I want to create something to like fully appreciate all of this. And supposedly this was something that wasn't completely, it was slightly outside of all of it and able to experience it, rather than all the other moving parts to the environment being like a part of it. This emanation of Source, this first human, was basically like able to just kind of be the God, like how God would want himself to experience all of that. But he didn't create a form for himself. He wanted to create like a child, essentially. Birth is the continuation of the energy of love and inspiration. As we go later into energy of love and inspiration, that was the strong enough field to power everything through the creation of matter and all that stuff. The continuation of that from your offspring is how it basically evolves. And that's how Source even saw it. How we see our children, that's how Source saw humans as the children. It didn't see it as being equal. It wanted its children to surpass God, what created it. So the potential of every human is supposedly to not be as powerful as God, is to actually surpass the power of God that created all, because we are that. We can do that. Just takes a bit of evolution, just tad to get to that level. But so Adam was around. So basically, I'm taking all these books and summarizing it real quick. So there's like a lot that happened in between this, but Adam was the first thing created, the first human created, the male figure created, supposedly from these texts, and his main role was to kind of understand, well, first discover and like explore the earth, explore all of the different pristine creations, understand all of the different pristine creations, and then designate all of the creations a purpose. And so here is kind of my intuition, because the books only give like, it's crazy, they go like crazy chapters on chapters in depth about certain parts, and then other parts they leave for later books. But my interpretation of what I'm about to say right here is that essentially God, Source Consciousness, created what it understood at the best of its ability to plan everything to be perfect, right? It was its idea to be perfect. And it kind of had its son as like the second check, the reviser of the earth, so to speak. So basically it was Adam's role to understand all the different animals, all the different plants, all the different herbs, everything, all the wind, everything. And then what's its purpose? Okay, that bee goes on that honey and creates pollen to fuel that, and like, it has a design here. Like, okay, that bee, I understand the purpose of that bee, I understand. But supposedly, if there was something that like Adam couldn't assign a purpose to back in the creation, Source would just be like, Adam's like, yo, I can't, like, what the fuck is this thing? It's got, like, you know what I'm saying? What purpose does this have? Supposedly that would be like an improvision of the perfect design to create it even more perfect, because this offspring of Source was just another source. And like I said, it was supposed to actually surpass. So God saw the perspective of his offspring to be, just as equal to his. So he's like, oh, if he's saying this don't make sense, maybe I'll overlook this. So like supposedly there's a lot of beings and things in the original creation that if purpose wasn't able to be designated to it, that it kind of ceased to exist, supposedly. And yeah, there's a bunch of little theories about that and stuff. So Adam was doing this stuff for a while. It actually wasn't until he was 118 years old that he kind of like eventually kind of started to get bored, yo. He started to get bored at around 118 years old. He was still in his pristine youth, you know. He didn't like we'll go into his diet and stuff a bit later, but actually I do think that there was one little page I wanted to read here about the first day, the very first day. There's only like a 2-page little entry right here, but I think pretty sure I bookmarked something over here. I'll just read this real quick to kind of get the little vibe. Where is it at? Here we go. Oh yeah, before I keep flowing, I gotta remember this stuff. But anyone got any questions so far? I mean, it's a lot of, you know.
Taking it in.
Yeah, this is a good little integration period for 2 seconds.
What book are you about to reference right now?
So these are the book series called The Ringing Cedars of Russia, or it's also known as the Anastasia series. I could show you them after and stuff like that. And
Oh, it's just a
you have a question? Or nah? I think she was just in some conversation. So yeah, I got the page right here. So real quick, the first day. You know, let's take a little journey here. Adam was interested in everything. Each blade of grass, each intricate little bug, the birds in the sky above, and water. The first sight of a stream, its transparent running water sparkling in the sun, filled him with wonder and admiration. And in it, he could behold life in its infinite manifestations. When Adam bent down to touch the water, his hand was immediately embraced by the current which caressed all folds of his skin and drew him in. Upon immersing himself in the water, he found his body becoming lighter. The gurgling water supported him and comforted his whole body. Splashing the water in the air with his hands, he was delighted to see the play of the sun's bright rays in each and every drop. Before the drops were once more received back into the stream. And it was with great sense of delight that Adam drank the water from the stream. And before the sun set, he gladly contemplated and bathed again and meditated. Hold on there, Anastasia. And it is a dialogue, you know, it's straight from the book. It's the whole book series is basically a dialogue between this character Anastasia. To make it simple, like a female Jesus, like for real. And then this other guy who's Vladimir Mercury, who is just this Russian man who met her. I'll go into that after we get into this. I'll say the little synopsis of the book series, but that's kind of beyond the scope. So basically he said, hold on there, Anastasia. You mentioned him drinking, but what did Adam eat all day? What food did he eat? She said, all around him were a multitude of fruits and a variety of tastes, berries, and edible grasses. But during those first days, Adam felt no sense of hunger. He remained satisfied with fresh air alone. With fresh air? You can't live on air. There's even a saying about that, he said. And then she said, one certainly cannot live on the air man today breathes. Today's air is dying and is often harmful for one's body and soul. You mentioned the saying that one cannot live on air, but there's also another saying, I have been fed by air alone, which corresponds to what was available to man in the beginning. Adam was born in a marvelous garden, and the air surrounding him did not contain a single harmful particle. Pollen had been dissolved into the air along with drops of purest dew. And then Vladimir said, pollen? What kind of pollen? She said, pollen from flowers and grasses, from trees and fruit, which diffused fragrances into the air. Some came from those close by, and while breezes brought others from distant places. Back then, man was not distracted from his great works by any problems of finding food. He was fed by everything around him through the air. This was the way it was all designed by the Creator right from the very beginning, so that all life on earth should strive to please man, and the air and the water and the breeze would be life-giving under the impulse of love. You're right about one thing. Air could be very harmful, and then he says some shit about an air conditioner. You know, he's just like an entrepreneur. Story's funny. But so they basically said that Adam was primarily nourishing himself off of air. But Adam wasn't just a straight breatharian. He ate berries and stuff. He ate like, little like cherries on trees, and they said that even they didn't go into it too much in depth there, but that all of those different aspects of pollen and different things that were diffused in the air would actually bring nutrition, like breathing in nutrition. The pollen was so potent back then that the diffused different fragrances and pollen from different plants and different fruits and things like that, when they would get breathed into the lungs, when they would, you would smell it either go in through the nasal or your mouth is open, whatever, however they get into you, they absorb right into your bloodstream and give you nutrition. So like, that's another thing about breatharianism, is not just breath, it's also like the things, the aspects of nutrition that can be carried through wind is another way to receive nutrition. And also, they talk about it later in the series, not there, but that like him talking about that stream of water that he was bathing in, that was another form of nutrition. Anastasia, the main girl we'll talk about, she'll go through these periods where she's literally energetically, physically, mentally, emotionally getting attacked by different dark forces and stuff, and then like literally she'll be on the brink of death and then crawl through the grass into a stream of water that, because of what we'll talk about later with the space of love and stuff like that, it has this life-giving essence to it that literally, like, they talk about the fountain of youth and things like this. You bait, like, dunking yourself in water and coming out completely healed and healthy and nourished and strong and stuff like that. Like, all that originates from what the life-giving properties of water is actually capable of. So there's many different ways to receive nutrition than just food. But also, Adam did eat certain shrubs and plants and vegetables, fruits and stuff like that. But the big thing here is another thing that's going on the board, is that get a different marker here. One should eat as one breathes. This is such a simple statement, but like the books go so hard on the importance of this statement. So supposedly, we'll get into like the dark forces and stuff a bit later, but supposedly these in a temple, and this is like, I think it was somewhere between like 3,000 to 6,000 years ago, that I think it was around like 5,000 years ago, that in one of the temples of the occult priesthoods, where pretty much the only people who had access to this temple, this gathering area of sorts from thousands of years ago, was the people that were in this occult life, basically. And this being, one of the members of their occult priesthood or whatever, wrote on this board in the meeting hall, where as soon as you walk in, everyone sees it, these exact words. And at that same moment, he died. The last letters were actually written like with his blood on the wall and stuff, and like, one should eat as one breathes. That was, nobody had any context as to why. They just saw a dead body and that on the wall. So they didn't understand it. And supposedly, as the story goes, is that all these thousands of years, none of the prevailing priests fully grasped the knowledge and the wisdom and the truth of this sentence. They actually suppressed it so no one else could understand it, and they only kept this sentence like within one of their small isolated collectives to try to understand it through the thousands of years. And supposedly Anastasia saying this saying in the books, like, it's kind of to say what I want to say, I have to explain a little bit about the book. So before I want to let's say it real quick. So basically, like, in a nutshell, the context of these books, just to say it very quickly, is there's this guy, he's the author, his name is Vladimir Magri. He's in Russia, specifically I think he was around Moscow or Siberia, and when he was an entrepreneur, and this was in the 1990s. This was very recent. It was in the mid 1990s. I think it was like 1994 or something like that. That he was an entrepreneur in Russia on an entrepreneurial like route. He was on a boat and he was basically going to certain docks around the coast of Russia. Russia's huge, so there's so many docks for supply exchange, for entrepreneurship and stuff. That's what he was. He was an entrepreneur. He had a boat. He stopped at a dock, and at this one dock, he found two old men. They were restocking and like refueling supplies and stuff, and they were kind of taking a break for the night, his whole crew and stuff. So then when he went into town on the dock, he saw these two old men. They just looked like two old men. He didn't know how old they actually were, but these two men actually end up being this woman Anastasia's grandfather and great-grandfather. And they tell him about the healing properties of a very specific variety of cedar, Siberian cedar trees known as ringing cedar trees, which they say it in the books. They didn't tell him, but these trees, their civilization knows them to appear in nature roughly around 3 every 1,000 years. These specific variety of cedar trees known as the ringing cedar trees. And these cedar trees are essentially the thing with cedar trees and most trees, but cedar trees are very potent in this. They have an average lifespan of about 500 years. And during that entire time period, for the first 450 years of its life, it's taking that entire time period to absorb cosmic energy from the output of the life on the planet. So all the life on the planet, we're all thinking, we're all feeling, we're all breathing, we're all existing. We're all generating energy by our heart beating. And by the collective energy of all the living beings beyond humans, life, animals, plants, all this stuff, the collective energy has an auric field that goes out into space. And essentially these trees lock onto that energy, absorb that energy, stock it up, and at the last 50 years of the cedar tree's life, what it's naturally supposed to do is spend the rest of its life giving that energy back to the earth, giving that energy back into the earth. So what the humans and the energy and life is putting out cosmically into space, it's returning that back into the earth to a large degree. But the thing is, with these ringing cedar trees, these are a specific type of tree that they're not able to give that energy back. For some reason, they don't say why, I don't think they understand why, but they do say that they don't know why, because they ask. And they just say that we don't know why, but for some reason, these ringing cedar trees aren't able to give that energy back. They still spent, like all the other ones, 450 years or so, absorbing massive amounts of cosmic radiation. And then now, all of a sudden, they're just kind of holding on to it when the tree thought it was going to be able to release it. So what supposedly happens is the tree, why it's called a ringing cedar tree, is because it starts to literally create an audible sound that sounds like a high-pitched ringing. Very subtle. It's like very subtle, not as loud as that. In nature, that when you listen, you could hear it. And when you're around this tree, you hear that high-pitched ringing noise. And that's how you know that that's one of the trees, that's a cedar tree, that isn't able to redistribute its energy that it accumulated. And so it does this ringing for a period of 3 years. And within this 3-year period, supposedly, the tree is like ringing as a literal like cry for help to be like essentially chopped down and have its wood either distributed in this necklace I'm wearing is made of this wood I'm talking about. This is cedar wood necklace, and this I believe, I don't want to say it wrong, I think it's like Liverstein stone in it. I got it from the Ring Cedars website, and they're very cheap too, very cheap. You could get pendants of cedar wood for like $5-6 on there, and then they have more pricey ones too. But you know, I'll provide that website to anyone who messages me and asks. But ringcedarsrussia.org. But yeah, so you either redistribute the healing properties of that tree through wearing pendants like it and allowing it to touch your skin like a crystal, pretty much, or they would make oil out of it and make like cedar nut oil, which has profound healing properties. I actually have some. I could show y'all. We're here physically if you want later after the class. I could show you a little bit of it. It's like very potent. You could drink a little bit of it. You could put it in elixirs, put it in tea, put on your skin. They make some of it with sea buckthorn. It's really good for the skin and stuff like that. And yeah, so long story short, these old men told this guy Vladimir about this tree, and they said, there's one over there. We see you're an entrepreneur. You can make mad money off of that. Chop it down, redistribute it, make a killing. We're not trying to make money. We just want to see that tree get used. And we're old, man. We're not trying to chop down a tree like that. So, like, can you go and chop that tree down? After some convincing, you know, he saw the dollar signs. When they kept talking about the healing properties and the nut oil, he was like, all right, let's see what this tree business is all about. So he goes into the Siberian taiga, the forests of Russia, and eventually looking for this tree, he finds this girl, which, like I said, is like a female Jesus. And she's a Russian recluse, which you find out later in the story, she's the granddaughter and the great-granddaughter of those two old men that he found. And so the book starts with, the whole series starts with this dude on his entrepreneurial journey. You know, he only spent 3 days with her. He spent 3 days with her in the woods, and then he had to go back on he had a whole crew. He was the captain, actually, of this entrepreneurial journey. So everyone was waiting on him to continue making the money. So he spent 3 days with her, accumulated massive amounts of knowledge, and just imagine spending 3 days with Jesus. Like, just, it's not literal, but like that's to put an image in your head of like what the energy dynamic was like. And like anything you ever ask, like infinite questions, like infinite answers, infinite articulation and stuff like that. And then he ended up going back to her and finding her again, and they end up having a kid together as well. In those 3 days, they actually they conceive, but it actually finds out later, like in book 5 or something, that they didn't actually like physically touch each other. They didn't like have sex or anything. They conceived without that, mostly because she knew how. That's beyond the scope of this right now. But so that's a bit of a nutshell as to the context of where this information is coming from. So the guy Vladimir is like this, like he's not the most literate dude. Like he gets better in writing as the books go, but basically the woman Anastasia, which by the time he met her, she was about 26. Now she's in her 50s, but like she told him all this information, and she told him to do these steps to create change in the world. She's like, write this book, the first book, Anastasia. She didn't say what to name it. She just said, write this book about what you've learned from our conversations in these 3 days. And then create an entrepreneurial constitution of basically beings that are entrepreneurs that want to do so ethically and want to do so in alignment with principles that are of higher consciousness. And then she laid forth a couple other things in the plan, but it all started with the book. Write the book. And he was like, yo, I'm a freaking entrepreneur, man. I didn't even finish school. Come on, man. I can't write a book. And she's like, I'll show you. And then she literally like draws on a stick in the dirt, like each letter of the alphabet. She's like, see each one of these? Only 26 of these damn letters. Every book in all of fucking human history was just these 26 letters. It's not, you don't have to be a genius to do this. It's all about the feelings and the emotion that you put behind the combination of letters and symbols. And she like gave him like a schooling on that. And then basically he's like, how am I supposed to remember all the things we talked about? You talked, bro, how am I going to remember that, he was saying. And then she was like, trust me, when you go into your heart and you feel the feelings that you felt when we had the conversation, you won't have to try to remember anything. You'll be able to remember it word for word. And that's basically how it went. Every time he would spend longer than 3 days with her years later, and like he'll remember everything down to the word by word, because it's basically imprinted in his consciousness. And so the reason I explain that is to go back to what we were originally saying. You find out later in the series that her great-grandfather, the oldest one, was actually one of the 6 priests that supposedly have controlled the fate of humanity for all those lineages. Is the direct descendant of one of the 6 priests that have incarnated for millennia now, for the past 6,000 years or so. Her great-grandfather was one of these priests, living in the taiga of the woods And all of these supposedly 6 priests, they would never actually meet in person, like kind of ever since the ancient times. They would telepathically communicate with one another. They could be on all opposite quadrants of the earth, and then they could just, like they're right next to each other, tune into each other's thoughts, and they can just see each other's thoughts. But something you also learn is that they had the ability to hide certain thoughts from the other priests. So they can have their own, like, private, like, agendas and stuff, but they basically would telepathically communicate. And you learn a lot about the priests from these stories based upon the great-grandfather, and then he actually passes in one of the books. He transitions, and they show his whole death ritual and stuff like that. And then after he passes, Vladimir has conversations with the grandfather, who basically says, like, I don't know if you knew or not, but homie was a priest, you know, he kind of, like, helped enslave humanity for years and stuff like that. It was, like, a whole mind blow, because it's just this beautifully heart-centered man in nature, just, like, all on his own, and, like, he's one of the big players of all that stuff. So that was, the reason why I explained all that will be more apparent when we get into that. But so we're gonna finish off the creation story here. Where we left off was that Adam was 118 years old, and he basically got bored with everything, understanding everything and giving it purpose. And Source God Consciousness was kind of confused as to why. And you know, you have everything, man. Literally, like after 118 years old, you know, the sun rose and stuff, and Adam was just like, you know, normally he would pop up out of the bed and stuff like that, and he'd be like, yeah, man, like, let's do life, let's explore stuff, let's, like, do everything. And then, like, he woke up one day, and he was just like, they said in the book, like, he kind of, like, turned, like, one of the birds that would, like, wake him up and stuff like that would be, like, sing this heavenly-ass song, and then, like, you know, he would just, like, I'm sleeping extra today, and he was just, like, didn't have that angst, that amp to life or whatnot. And then God was kind of like, yo, like, what is going on here? And then remember that sentient consciousness of the energy of love and inspiration, how it was literally a consciousness that kept God company and, like, was able to communicate and stuff. This, what you could really see as the energy of love and inspiration essentially communicated to God, like, there's, you know, the energy of love isn't there, you know, like, Adam got no love. Oh no, actually, no, that's after. My apologies. What happened here was that when God saw that, he thought instantly, like, let me make Adam a partner. Because God was going through it before the energy of love and inspiration came when he was all alone. So he was like, let me make him a partner. So that was supposedly when Eve was created. And that was when he was like, all right, let me create a daughter. Let me create the feminine version of God consciousness, you know, let me create that. And supposedly, as the story goes, when he first created Eve, like, Eve walked by Adam and stuff like that, and just walked up and just was like, she's being like a, you know, she was literally just created, and she's just like walking around being beautiful or something like that. And then, like, Adam saw her and was like like unimpressed, like, was just like, you know, she's leopards. They say it in the book. It's like the book of creation, with the co-creation book where all this stuff comes from. It's mostly written in rhymes and stuff like that. So it was mad funny. It was like, there's no leopard. I mean, most leopards have better skin than these, and, like, you know, there's better skin on leopards. You know, kangaroos could jump higher. You know, tigers could run faster. You know, like, it looks kind of like me, yeah. But, like, what's the whole big deal here, you know? It's, you know, he's 118 years old, you gotta think about it. Like, he's explored so much. He's like, I've seen, like, the world of animals and life and stuff. He's like, that's just something that kind of looks like me, you know? What's to be impressed by here, you know? And, like, I found that kind of funny, and it was... yeah, for real, man. That cracked me up. Like, the poetry that they use, like... Yeah, I'm trying to remember one of the lines, but, like, yo, it's just mad. It's mad funny. And so God redirected. Oh yeah, so basically, like, when God realized that like Adam wasn't like in love with Eve, it was literally because of the energy of love. And that's when the energy of love told God, like, yo, like, he doesn't have what you have. Like, that inspiration that you're creating everything. Like, God's like, why won't you love her? She is perfect. Like, you have love and inspiration in you to say that. You know, that love and inspiration isn't, you know, in the creations and whatnot. So supposedly, as it goes, is God redirected every particle of love surrounding himself onto the earth. And the key here is every particle of love surrounding himself, saving none for itself. The earth was engulfed in the radiance of love and inspiration, and it was then that Adam basically just started to be invoked with these feelings of radiance. And then like he just, literally, like they describe it as he woke up that rising, and then he was thinking of Eve. He was like, remember that creature that I was like so unimpressed by, like, you know, like, literally, like how they describe it, like that creature that I was so unimpressed by, like, you know, it's kind of beautiful, like, you know, they did kind of look like me, like I wonder what there is to that, I wonder what they have to say, I wonder what their interpretation of life and creation is. Maybe they're doing the same thing I'm doing on this little Pokemon hunt of all the different animals and stuff, and like, you know, started to think. And then he was like, well, I wonder if she's still here, I wonder, you know. And then Adam went out looking for her, and he saw her just chilling at a stream, just doing her Eve thing, just like she was like playing with the stream and putting it in her hair and stuff, and was just doing her thing. And then it's so funny, man, thinking about the innocence of the interaction. Like, he literally was like, saw her to the stream, he's like, hey, you know, streams are beautiful. And no, first he said, you're really beautiful, and then he said, I've never seen eyes so resplendent and stuff like that. And then she was just like, yeah, I'm beautiful, that's what I was existed to be, and like what I was born to be. And then like he's like, yeah, well, water is beautiful, streams are good, like that's what he says, streams are good. Do you want to go in the stream together? And like they take a little bath together, and like there's no clothes, they're just naked together, just like in the stream, just splashing each other, and it's like kids, you know, it's just like little innocent children, pure essence and stuff. And then that's kind of how that came about. And so God supposedly, and this is when source God consciousness started to become less visible. So as the story says, is prior to this moment, when God basically like gave all the love and inspiration to the earth single-handedly, before that happened, God was able to like speak to everyone and everything on the earth so much more easily. Still able to do it, but it was like, it's like God is right here type of thing. And he was just able to like have fluent conversations. Adam would literally talk to God like his father, you know, like he rate like a fucking father. He's there, present, all that stuff. And but during this time, when he gave all of the energy of love and inspiration, it kind of like distanced him from the realm of manifestation. So God had to kind of speak through its creation. Speak like each animal, each plant, each insect would be like God's way of communicating, which we actually go into that way towards the end in the book of Kin, which is like a living book of reading nature like a book. And that's how God talks. And that's supposedly where this creation story is coming from, is the living book of nature. It's like, this isn't a physical, it's now a book because this guy from Russia met this woman and wrote these books, but it was never a physical book in all the thousands of years that this has been, you know, way longer than thousands of years. And so God gave the energy of love and inspiration to, you know, the earth and stuff. And it was this whole moment in the book, you know, the energy of love and inspiration is like, you ain't even gonna save a particle of me for yourself. You're gonna be lonely, just like the beginning. You're gonna be lonely and dark and stuff like that. And then like the energy of love is, God is like, nah, go be with my children. Give them all that you've given me. Give them all of it. And then the energy of love is like, okay, fine, but I'm gonna leave a particle of me with you. Bye. And then at the end, like the energy of love like went to the earth and stuff. And then you see like the one particle that it gave shooting down from God onto the earth. God's like, I said every particle. Like, he was like, every particle. And he was, because, you know, and then she's like, why won't you save any? You're literally alone in, like, supposedly from the story, that's how God still is today. from that moment is still just like from the very like he was in the very beginning, just kind of alone in the omnipresent darkness and silence of the void, just exists there, being able to observe everything, and obviously still work through it, but in less direct ways, able to work through its manifestations. Like his conduits was the elements of nature. And you think about it, why wouldn't God create a physical form for himself and stuff like that? Adam actually asks him that. He says, why aren't you like here with me? Like how I have a form. And he said, I used all the energy of love and inspiration on creating Earth and all of you guys. I didn't think like he didn't say he couldn't. He said, I didn't think about it. I was just doing y'all. You know, I was creating y'all. I didn't even think about how I would play a role in this. I'm just the one doing this stuff. It's like, you know, the interpretation of God, literally the definition of selfless. Like, it didn't even have, like, it wasn't like, oh, I could, but, like, no. It's like that process didn't even happen. It was completely transparent, selfless. And so, back to Adam and Eve, after, you know, they played in this stream and stuff like that, they're all in love with each other and stuff. Basically, they start talking about the nature of existence. What else do you talk about? And they're just like, you know, oh, how many animals have you seen? How many, you know, type of thing. And then like, and then they were talking about the divine dream, conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation. And like, you know, since Eve was literally just born, she's kind of, Adam's 118 talking to a newborn, you know, and like, and she's kind of like asking about like, you know, what is this fucking beautiful place? And he says that it's the emanation of source God consciousness, their father's dream. And then he says conjoined creation and joy for all from his contemplation. And then she says, how does one do that? And he says birth. And then she starts thinking about birth, and then she like starts contemplating that. And then they spend the rest of the night, like they say, like, you know, they're kind of like cuddling, caressing each other and stuff like that. And it doesn't say whether they actually like physically conceived through like, you know, intercourse and stuff like that, or if it was like an immaculate conception, like, because Anastasia is from supposedly this like a direct lineage of these ancestors, and like she was able to do, and this was in the 90s, you know, in the 90s she was supposedly able to conceive without physical intercourse. So I would, you know, there's a good chance Adam and Eve didn't actually have sex with each other, or maybe they did. I don't know. They don't say it in the book, but either way, they were at night with each other, just like slept under the stars, contemplating the existence of like, you know, birth and stuff like that. And then, like, they make it seem in the book that Eve pretty much woke up pregnant and like had a visibly like already developed stomach, and like literally woke up the next day. If it wasn't the next day, the book sure as heck makes it seem like it was fucking like an instant afterwards, that like, or maybe it was just brushing whatever, but you know, she's like, put your hand on my stomach, and he's like, what's this? She's like, it's the emanation or the byproduct of our divine dream. You know, this is the birth, this is the creation right here. And then like literally like a paragraph later, it almost seems like she conceived, was pregnant, and gave birth in like a freaking day or something like that. I don't think it was like that, but the way that all this is on one page, and like, you know, and then before you know it, oh my goodness, a baby's being born. And then she comes out, and then they say Adam was like running around to all the animals. You're like, yo, I just created life. Come look at my creation. Rhinos, giraffes, dolphins, elephants, eagles. Look at what I did. Like, literally, like a little kid, like running through, like, look at this exciting thing I did. I created this. God, are you proud of me? Like, look at all this. And I created something. He was like super happy, as you would imagine. And, this time. So, upon connecting, Adam and Eve felt like to fulfill the divine dream would be to create birth. So when they slept under the stars and contemplated creation, Eve pretty much woke up the next rising pregnant. And then all of this time, Earth was still the only materially embodied creation. All other godlike beings in the universe tried to understand how God made the earth. So they tried to create the co-creation. I'm just saying some of my words. Like basically, so at this time, remember I keep mentioning the outside entities of the universe, because our universe isn't all that there is. There is universes outside of us and beings and consciousnesses and sentience that are omni-universal, able to communicate inter-universally with one another through thought and stuff like that. And so a lot of these energies, because if you remember at the beginning of it, they were like, yo, God, like creating a physical, doing all that yourself, like that's a lot. That the doubt and all that we were talking about at the beginning, like that's because they haven't actually done what God had done in their universes, their local ones around us. So they were kind of like, yo, how did he do this? Where did this being, how? They didn't understand the love and inspiration part, is what it turns out. And so basically these aspects, some of them, you know, not all of them were just the most omni-loving, you know, some of them had intentions to kind of, their intentions were pure, but so here's the logic I'm gonna explain, is that they wanted to recreate the physical creation. They wanted to create their own earths, their own humans, their own self-sustaining ecosystems with matter. And, you know, matter is a very condensed energy of frequency and stuff like that. So to like create a whole creation off of that density of energy, like the amount of energy is immense. So like they were like, they see obviously the potential in recreating that and kind of reverse engineering that. So they were trying to learn, how did God do this? And instead of going straight to God, because God basically kept it kind of a secret, and you find out later why. They actually don't tell you why, but like Vladimir asks Anastasia, and Anastasia said, the best I could do is interpret. And, you know, her interpretation was that God was trying to protect the creation, because if other universes created, or even within this universe, whatever, other universe supposedly, at the very beginning, if they created the same thing, this supreme, all-powerful being that unites every aspect of creation, all the particles, diverse energies in one, that they would eventually, like, wonder who is supreme. It was supposedly what she interpreted the reasoning of God might be, was that, that God was trying to potentially prevent an inter-universal war of, like, cataclysmic proportions, of, like, these all-powerful beings finding out about the existence of these other all-powerful beings that are created the same way, and they're like, oh, let's see who's supreme, let's see who's the higher consciousness. So that could have either gone, it could have been resolved peacefully, they could have been great friends, but also the potential opportunity did allow, because this is a free will universe and all this is under God, like he's taking all these factors into consideration, as you would imagine, because it's a free will universe, like it could be resolved peacefully, but it also could lead to completely intergalactic universal war like we've seen on this planet. So that being said, there's a reason why he probably wanted to keep it under wraps and stuff like that. So God would basically tell like Adam and stuff like that, like, you know, you can create anything you want. Everything that you ever could want, need, desire, anything is here, and if it's not here, you have everything needed to create all of it. Like, you don't have to think about whether it, like, how it works, the nature of it, like, you just are a part of it. The analogy they give is you don't have to understand how the car works, you just gotta drive it, type of thing. So, with that being said, all of these things, these consciousnesses outside of the earth were actually communicating and like subtly influencing Adam and Eve. They were communicating with Adam, basically like asking like, yo, like, how do you create, how was all this created? But they weren't trying to say it straight up. They were like kind of like conversing with him telepathically to get him to reveal it, and saying certain things to kind of like poi him into revealing the information, because they figured like if God wouldn't tell them, they figured that his children would, because God wouldn't want to hide anything from his children. He would want his children to have everything. And so Adam, at first, all these different things, he like rejected them. He was like, nah, what the fuck? God said not to, like, I'm gonna listen to the dude. He's pretty dude, dope, you know what I mean? And like, so he came up to Eve, and then he was kind of like in that conflicted energy, and then supposedly Eve was also receiving the same telepathic like shit, and then she's like, yeah, I know, they've been saying like, you know, the proposition that they were making to Adam and Eve as to why they should tell them the nature of how creation works in the physical realm, how God did it so that they can get the information from them. They said, if you understand the nature of the creation from the ground up, take it apart, look inside of it, understand all of it, then you can create something more perfect, is kind of what they were saying to them. Was, if you understand the whole nature of this perfection, you can improve upon its perfection. So like Adam was like, nah, that's some trickery, that's some fuck shit. And then like Eve was like, I see that, but what if? But what if? What if they're not lying? What if we can create something more perfect from understanding this? And then supposedly from what the story says is that in that exact moment, Adam contemplated, and then he ripped off a fruit tree. They just say fruit tree, but the chapter's called Unsatisfying Apple, so, you know, it's probably the apple that they talk about. And, you know, he bit off the, he took off a branch of the tree and then just started eating the fruit and stuff like that. But here's the thing, the whole apple, it's not like he ate the apple and that's what, damn it, why'd you eat the apple, you know what I mean? The apple had nothing to do with it. It was what happened after it. It was a metaphor for analysis. Basically, he took apart the branch, and they said before he ate it, actually in a book, he took the branch of the apple and started investigating it. And this was the first time that investigative, like, trying to understand, like, what originated all of it, rather than understanding what it is, like, as what its role is and stuff like that, understanding how it was created. Adam was in the mindset and the consciousness of, like, accepting the creation of what is and what you can do with it. Just really what you can do, how you can create, what you can create in the world. That was where his consciousness was. And it was from this moment that began the whole shebang of humans analyzing, breaking things apart, that critical thinking, and that, you know, that aspect that a lot of people attribute to our benefit evolutionarily, you know, the thinking mind and things like that. And so, yeah, that's the whole story up until the apple and stuff like that. It says Adam disregarded the requests, but Eve approached Adam saying, what if they're right? And the way to make a more perfect creation is to understand this one. And then Adam tore a branch off of a tree, began analyzing it, and it's continued up until today. Is how it supposedly, well, that's actually all I needed from that, but that's supposedly how that started. And that brings us up into kind of after the time period of this creation. You know, they even go into talking about, like, in the story of the Bible, the Christian thing, they have the story of Lilith and stuff like that, and how Lilith was supposedly Adam's first wife, and then, like, Lilith wasn't, like, all obedient to his masculinity, and then God kicked Lilith out of Eden, and he was like, oh, let me move on to the next, here's Eve. Like, that's kind of what the Bible says, but this says it's completely different. It had nothing to do with that. Eve was the first, and exactly as it described, and then Lilith was, as, like, a little bit later in time, actually, as this story, was when more, you know, after Adam and Eve created life, you know, they created more and more, obviously, and then reproducing, and then the planet started to come into fruition. And during the time that they were talking about, like, people were like cavemen and that time period and stuff like that, people were just, like, not doing, like, anything conscious, and they were just, like, low IQ, they look stupid, like, you know what I mean? Like, that, like, image that they put was, like, when we were actually, like, kind of at our prime. You know, they made it look like that's when we were the least evolved, when that was the thriving of the Vedic civilizations, the Vedic cultures. And that's where the Vedas come from. That's where, like, I'm pretty sure, someone correct me if they know it, Veda means, like, or Ved means, like, insight, knowledge, or wisdom, or something like that, or, like, illumination. And so it's just, you know, it's intuitive what it means. And Lilith was supposedly, I'm not going to get too much into it, because one, I don't fully remember it. It's in book 4 or 5, but supposedly Lilith was like an outcast of one of the civilizations that were there, because we'll get into it. We're actually about the priesthood and stuff, and how, you know, looking at it all from a timeline, you have creation, you have Adam and Eve chilling in the stream doing their thing, then they create life, then they understand and start to accept analysis, and then they start to analyze things, try to understand the nature of the creation, so that they can share its secrets with the beings that are asking, and so that they could create something better. And then you kind of have this long thing that leads into the creation of more and more humans, civilizations start to come about, and then, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there and then move here, because I'm just trying to make this as coherent as possible. And I'll pick back up from that, but where we're gonna go right now is basically what the ancient Vedic cultures were like. So, you know, we went into the creation of Earth, we went into life in the beginning, what it was like, you know, kind of breatharian, like 90% breatharian pretty much, and then like, you know, just existing and eating as one breathes. So like, that doesn't necessarily just mean only eating breath, but that means eating should be it shouldn't be a cognitive process. It's like you're walking through your kin's domain, your garden. We'll get into it later. Let's say you have a garden and stuff like that. You're walking through it, just at the exact moment that you're walking by fruit and vegetables and herbs and stuff like that that you've cultivated. It's a very complicated process to which each and every living being is connected through the Earth's core to the astrological alignments, and there is a masculine and feminine energy that is at work with every plant that has roots in the Earth. And they are utilizing all of the universe's forces, all the universe's different diverse energies into metabolizing whatever the person who planted it needs to be healthy. So what that means is, when you plant things, this kind of goes into the culture of the ancient Vedic people. This was just common sense to them. Like, this is in book 1, they talk about, like, when you plant something in the ground, you take the seed, put it under your tongue for at least 7 minutes. Now, while you're doing that, ideally you want to be barefoot, feet earthing on the ground right where you're going to plant it, and then for at least 7 minutes standing there and doing a deep breathing and, you know, bringing your life force energy to it, up and down, and cycling it through. What this is doing is, 1, giving the seed all of the genetic information that it needs to understand your biological and energetic makeup. You know, it understands your energy body through your physical body, because like we said, physical body and energy body are kind of one. If you mess up your physical body, it's going to influence your energy body, and vice versa. And then if you heal one, you heal the other, vice versa. So they understood this. The plants all intuitively understand this, and they're able to, from getting your genetic information from your saliva and like integrating it for 7 minutes at least, it is able to produce fruits, vegetables, whatever. It doesn't change what grows on it at all. It just changes the nutrients in what grows. And then also the thing about the feet is, obviously, it's, you know, most people already know the negative ions and stuff like that, releasing toxins from your feet into the earth. And then when the earth is getting information about your toxins, the most potent release of your toxins is through the feet when you're planted into the earth. And then when you're releasing all of those toxins, you're giving it the information about what it needs to metabolize to heal those exact toxins. So all of that being said, a garden back in this time isn't just, you just get some seeds, fucking water it, just like all the, you know, most people hire gardeners, they hire someone else to grow what they're gonna eat. Like, in their culture, that's like why would you ever even fathom, like, the food you eat, you plant that, so it grows for you. If you're eating fruit that was grown by somebody else, that fruit is going to be specifically conditioned to their makeup. That not only might not be beneficial to you, things like that can actually be detrimental to you. So in their culture, they would actually say, like, as to like their like stealing and you know, trespassing and like different injustices and stuff like that, these things wouldn't even cross their consciousness, because if you would imagine like walking up to someone else's domain, and if you just like grab an apple from someone else's tree, the key here is without their consent. If someone gifts you from their tree, that's different because it's a whole consciousness exchange. But if you take from someone else's garden or domain anything that, like, specifically something edible that you didn't get permission for, that's usually going to actually hurt your stomach, and you're going to instantly, like, feel it not agreeing with you. And it can actually, if you, like, go and, like, eat everyone's apple, like, that could poison you supposedly, and, like, literally, like, create so much imbalance within the body that it could, like, deeply hurt you. And that's where disease and stuff comes from. So they wouldn't even think about stealing from each other, because they're like, I'm not going to get nutrients from that if I steal it. If I want nutrients, I have to grow it myself. That's just how things work. So they didn't even need to, like, talk about don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They just, like, here's what you do, and then the things that you do make so much sense that which you wouldn't do, you just don't do, because you understand the whole picture and stuff. So yeah, Vedic culture. I'm gonna read a little bit of I really like book 6. This one really goes into a lot of these things, like, really potently. Some of the books will be more potent than other ones. This one really goes ham. I'm gonna read this part right here that talks about Vedism. That's kind of the culture of the Vedic people. And this is all from chapters called A History of Mankind, told by Anastasia. And it's just like chapters on chapters, and just like the in-depth workings of their culture. And, like, you know, this whole masterclass, obviously, I said it at the beginning, like, I just feel like this information, like, for real needs to get out. So, like, you know, although I'm not done with the books, I want to do this class before I leave and stuff. So it's going to be more organized in the future, but I'm just giving, like, a taste. Everything that I'm sharing right now is much more depth if you actually read the books. Like, literally everything. The creation story, everything else. There's so much more to it than what I'm able to, you know, touch up on. But, so, starting here, this is basically like a little introduction to Vedism. People have been living on the earth for billions of years. Everything on the earth was created perfect right from the start. Trees, blades of grass, bees, the whole animal world. There is a direct connection between everything living on the earth and the entire universe. The apex of creation is man, and in great pristine harmony of all things, man was created harmonious. Man's purpose is to learn all about his surroundings and create perfection in the universe, to create the likeness of the world in other galaxies, and with each new creation of his, to add more splendor to earthly creations. The way will open for man to create on other planets when man is able to overcome temptation, when man is able to hold in unity the grand and diverse energies of the universe inherent in himself, and when he does not allow one of them to take precedence over the rest. And that's key. Having all of the grand diverse energies within you and not having one take precedence over the rest. Not at 51, 49, like, you know, pretty much the whole ideal pristine when you're in your God state is both are completely equal. Doubt, confidence, masculine, feminine, etc. So not like letting one take precedence over the other. The day when the whole earth is a paradise garden will mark the opening of the path of creation in the universe. And once man becomes aware of the whole harmony of the earth, he will be able to contribute his own splendor. And once again, when they're saying his, they're talking about, like, as the pronoun of God. So that's man and women. Man takes it upon himself to take account of his actions once in every million years. Whether he makes a mistake, whether he allows one of the many diverse energies he contains to dominate at the expense of the rest, a global catastrophe takes place. Then everything starts again from the beginning. And this has happened many times. That's why they said humans have been around for billions of years, like, had to restart a lot. And one of mankind's million-year periods may be divided into 3 ages: the Vedic age, the age of image, and the age of the occult. So I'm gonna write that down just to have this. So you got the within one man, it's marked, but you get this one in a period of 1 million years. split into like threes right here. You got the Vedic age. The image age. And the occult age. And each one lasts about actually, no, they're not. Isn't the most accurate diagram, actually, because it's not like 1/3 of the thing. I'm pretty sure the Vedic age lasts for... Oh yeah, pretty much the Vedic age is most of it. The Vedic age supposedly is 990,000 years. The image age is 6,000 years. And the occult age is only 1,000 years. So basically most of, humanity, I'm going to just write this, but you heard. So Vedic age is 990,000 years. Image age is 6,000 years. And the occult age is 1,000 years. So these are the main epochs of the every million-year cycle. And basically, like, if we go through this whole cycle and man lets certain energies predominant over the other and they're not completely balanced, like literally like fresh start, new million years, let's try this time, over and over until they got it right. And that's how we're still alive. It's what it says. And because you would imagine at first, the way that this says in our universe, we were the first physical creation to exist. So basically, we didn't have a template to go off of. We didn't have context. We didn't know how to do this stuff. It's like, someone has birth and, they give birth. They're like, oh, where's the manual for this thing? How do I operate this? I don't know. They just figured it out through trial and error, literally. And that's how we became so wise as a collective civilization as well, because it's not like every time we started over, it was like, respawn and we don't have any memory. We retained all of the memory through all of the epochs. We just kept taking on new form. And so the first age of humanity on the earth, the Vedic age, like I said, lasts 990,000 years. During this age, man lives in paradise like a gladsome child, maturing under parental care. During the Vedic age, God is known to man. All God's feelings are inherent in man, and through them man is able to obtain any advice he needs directly from God. And if man should suddenly make a mistake, God is free to correct it simply by giving a hint, without disturbing the general harmony or infringing on man's freedom of will in any way. In the Vedic age, man does not raise questions about how or by whom the world, the universes, the galaxies, along with his marvelous planet called Earth, were created. Everyone is completely aware that everything around, either visible or invisible, has been created by their Father, namely God. Because when you think about it, like, if you have, let's say I have a sister, when I'm young, I look at my parents or something, I'm like, how does this exist? What molecules went into creating the parents? Like, we made love. It's from our love. They came from us. Like, boom, You don't look at a baby and you're like, how? What molecules went into creating this? Like, naturally, like, we don't, like, question what we intuitively know how it created. We don't look deeper than what is apparently shown to us. And so, during the but like I said, all of that was because, in my opinion, Source God Consciousness trying to like have a foolproof type of protection. You know what I mean? And so during the Vedic age, man did not bow down before God, nor was there a multitude of religions which sprang up afterwards. There was a culture to life. People lived a divine way of life. There was no diseases of flesh. Feeding and clothing himself in a divine manner, man simply didn't think about food and clothing. Thought was otherwise occupied with the excitement of discovery, and no rulers reigned over human society. There were no boundaries marking off states as there are today. Human society on the earth consisted of happy families. The various continents were inhabited by families. They were all united by their aspiration to create a space of splendor and love. There were many new discoveries, and each family, upon making a splendid discovery, felt the need to share it with others. Families were formed by the energy of love, and everyone is fully aware that a new family would create one more oasis of splendor on their native planet. There were many rituals, holidays, and carnivals among the people of the Vedic age, each imbued with great meaning, sensitivity, and a conscious awareness of the real divine existence on the earth. Each ritual served as a grand school and a grand examination for each man that took part in it. An examination in the eyes of others, in the eyes of oneself, and consequently in the eyes of God. And then they go into kind of like the wedding rite. So that's a little nutshell on what the culture was like. How, a lot of that stuff is intuitive. No borders. It's all abundant. The thing about crime and stuff, like all of the main things that we see as manifested issues or turbulences or conflicts within our world just intuitively didn't arise because of their connection with the divine and their intuitive actions. So they would act off of inspiration and love, and that would lead to a certain way of life that wasn't necessarily written down in like a philosophy that they all agreed upon. Everyone naturally followed this way of life. They didn't have to say, stop doing that, don't do that. They weren't basically bombarded with distortion, so they were clear from the start. They didn't have to be told what to do and what not to do. They just were, and they lived a divine way of life that was just in harmony with the Tao, so to speak. And so their wedding rite, I'll kind of go into it in a little nutshell. We're gonna go in the end about family domains. I touched on it I didn't really touch on it yet, but basically the family domains is basically like all of these books, like the kind of conclusion to all of it is like showing you a way to get back in tune with all of the culture of our ancestors and how to do that in the modern day and how we can actually step by step do it. And there's like ample information showing you all the details. We'll get into it. But the wedding rituals basically would consist of when they kind of like didn't play no friend zone type of game with their like romances and stuff like that. Like they just like, if I choose you, I choose you, yo. Like it's apparent. Like, like the guy they say in the story, like it would be a typical case if you have a young man like looking up at a woman or something like that, and then when they find their intended and stuff like that, for them to exchange some type of communication, obviously not English, telepathically, of something along the lines of like, within you I see the future of my co-creation on this planet. Like I can see us creating this space of love, this family domain. I can see us creating this together. And then the woman would say something, if she agreed, something along the lines of, I align with this. I'm down to create with you. Let's create a space of love to basically please God. You know what I mean? Like God wants to see its creations succeed in overcoming him in a way. Like he wants to be the continuation of God. So what did God do that makes God God? God made stuff. He created like all of it. So as you create naturally, and here's the thing, co-creation with the divine, not like killing things to create things. This is made of wood. You could say that's a divine creation, it's a living thing, but is this alive? It has now become an inanimate collection of particles because the life has been severed from it to make it. That's not conjoint creation. That's artificial creation. And when you work with nature, create more life rather than taking life to make something that you think is life because it's tangible or something, like, actually working with life, bringing more life into the world. That's divine creation. So the highest creation that you could create is something that is a paradise of nature, a garden, a forest. We'll get into that part. But basically, like, their wedding rituals would basically coincide with the establishment of their family domain. with the establishment of their family domain is when they would pretty much like they would do that at like the same time of their wedding, and as their it would be around the same time period. And there's more to that, but you know, I do want to make sure we get through all this in the time and stuff like that. So they would essentially like get straight down to business. They're not just like, you know, in the honeymoon phase and stuff. They're like, we have a divine purpose. You have to do it as much as me. You're a male, I'm a female. Like, you know, we have to conjointly create to do what it is that we're here to do. And it's not like have to. It's an inspiration. You know, they know that that's their purpose, that's their drive, and that's where their heart is. So they ain't beating around the bush over here. They're like, you know, we're here to create greatness together. We're here to create life through humans, through animals, through plants, create more life together. So that was like their general understanding, and there obviously was no like arranged marriage type of thing or anything like that. There would be it was just kind of intuitive, and they would also have rituals where I'm not going to get into it, but they would have a lot of like different rituals that do trickle into the occult, but the occult kind of like perverted them. There was like a ritual where like if in a colony of like these kins domains, like some say a girl like is single after most people have gotten married and stuff like that, there's like a certain day in alignment with like an astrological cycle that they would do this little ceremony of like making a little raft on a stream, and then they would put like candles, sacred scents in there, and then like fruit and like things from their garden that they've grown themselves, and then basically putting it on like a little basket, so to speak, and letting it kind of float adrift in the water. And they would like basically like put their intentions of their beloved, of their intended. They're like, bring my soulmate to me, pretty much. And like they would flow it down a stream, and then one of the guys would like find the fruit, and then like this is just a thing. Their senses were so enhanced when they would be able to taste a fruit out of all the domains. They would be able to find what domain that fruit came from, or that vegetable, or that herb, or whatever it, like garden it came from. They would be able to like know. It's almost like if you the best example that's coming through right now, if you go into like certain people's houses just have a distinct smell to them. Not good, bad, just like their house has a certain smell that you recognize, you know, like, you know, you go into a childhood friend's home, you're like, oh man, that, you know, I remember this, you know, like they, you know, it's like that, but you're literally connected with all other consciousnesses to be that in tune with your senses, to literally like sniff out where the frick that taste came from, find the domain, and then found the girl in that domain who sent it. And then they would like pretty much just like accept that they're fated. Like they're fated and destined to be together at that point. And that would be like that's like a little information about how their love life was like and stuff like that. And then child raising, you know, this is honestly, I could do a whole thing on this alone. This is what the main thing of the books is about, is like building a relationship with children that like allows them to be in their fullest potential. Howdy, Cindy. Howdy, make it. And there so many things I could start with saying here, but the first thing here is that children learn organically through real consciousness. So through the direct emanations of God's source consciousness is what increases what we'll go into later, but the speed of thought of the consciousness of the being, to allow them to make their own realizations and receive that which nature is giving them. Because the thing here is that plants, animals, like living beings, they would actually communicate energetically to humans in ways that when we tune in, we can receive and we can hear them, just like we're talking to each other here now. It's just a different language. It's the language energetically of feelings. And so one of the biggest things about raising children is raising them in the presence of nature. They say that the biggest school in the Vedic culture, like what is the biggest contributing factors to a child's, like how was their children educated back then, They didn't have schools back then, as you would imagine. What they actually learned the most from was, one, obviously spending time in their family domain, in not just a paradise of nature, but a paradise of nature that their parents intentionally and lovingly created specifically for these beings to thrive there. All of the life there is focused on humans. It's said in the divine thing, in some of the co-creation chapters I was reading earlier, that all aspects of the divine, all aspects of living life is made to basically serve man, as man is an aspect of, is like the direct emanation of God's source consciousness. All of these different aspects of life are like the hands of God, the extensions of divinity that they use to fulfill the divine dream. Because they all understand, it's not like they're like, oh, I'm doing the human's will because I care, so I'm their slave. It's like they're all working towards a greater purpose. Even the human, anything that comes through the human in that organic state is of the divine dream, is going to be something that leads to conjoined creation and joy for all from its contemplation. So all aspects, the plants, animals, they would work with humans and stuff like that. They would actually take care of the children. But so that's the first thing, is mostly their children would learn through nature, specifically in the established kin's domain, the family domain. And then another big way that they learned was actually through their many festivals. Actually, how we do in the spiritual communities, all these gatherings and stuff, pretty much. You know, like they would have these gatherings and they would just get together for all these different reasons that they would celebrate and festivities and stuff. They would socialize, they would exchange information, they would exchange fruit from each other's gardens, they would, you know, exchange energy and information there. And that was actually like what it describes as mostly the school of these children. How their children would mostly learn is through, I think it actually quotes it right here. To the question as to who remained the most important figure in the raising of children of Vedic times, one could confidently answer that it was the culture and way of life lived by families in the Vedic age. So, literally, their teacher was just watching the lifestyle of their ancestors, of their elders, of the people of their society. That's what taught their kids, is specifically being within nature to be able to make new neural connections, to be able to increase their speed of thought and learn on their own. We don't need to tell kids so much. They have access to all of that. The only thing that, you know, the parent does is really just allow yourself to be that guiding influence and hold space and protect the life form. And another big thing though, and here's something that's like super against many like doula philosophies and stuff like that, is like, you know, when you've created a kin's domain, a space of love within nature, that's the womb of the child, essentially. Like the way that they talk about the kin's domains is you create this kin's domain. We'll get more into it later, but
hey brother,
the
I want to stay.
Mhm.
Much love and light. I gotta get going. I do apologize for interrupting. Thank you
all
so much
love,
for
my
this
brother.
knowledge. I
Glad
gotta
you
go
can
to one of
make
these
it,
actual
man.
spiritual events right now at an Oasis, my friend.
Go for
God
it,
bless,
man.
bro. We'll connect more soon, all right?
Of course,
Nice
if
love.
you want the recording, make sure you message me with your email so I can send it to you afterwards. I was going to say that at the
Will
end.
do.
Anyone who wants the full recording afterwards, might take me a few days. I'll send it to anyone who sends me their email, alright? And I'll
Thank
send
you,
you some
brother.
other
Love
information
and light.
too. Much love, brother. Glad you could be here,
We'll
Matt.
see each other soon.
Yes,
Peace.
I. So, where was I? Children were learning through nature. There's a certain, like I said, that Russian guy Vladimir actually had a child with Anastasia. And this book right here, Book of Kin, is when he's 5 years old, 5.5 years old, and this kid's already way smarter than Vlad, way more coherent, telepathic, all this stuff. And like they would have things going on where like an eagle would pick up a child and fly the child up above the family domain, a little infant child. And like it's like a well-known thing in their culture that what that would do is increase their altitude, increase their magnitude of perspective, and spark new thoughts into creation that would teach them naturally. So all of the different things that animals would do that nature would allow them to experience, all of the different things from climbing a rock to falling out of a waterfall to swinging on a vine to meditating near the grass, like all of these different like things that a child naturally does. You don't have to tell it to do it. You don't have to sit it in a classroom and say meditate here for 5 minutes. When no distortion is present, what they intuitively do is interact with God's creations in a way that sparks imagination and sparks the formation of new information. So nature, Earth School, is the real school of the children of New Earth. And the one thing I was going to say that was in contradiction to a lot of like, you know, understandings is like, you know, that the baby literally needs to be like by the mother at all times. Like, dude, when this child was born, Anastasia would literally like leave the infant child like alone and like go on a walk to get like, you know, whatever she was gonna do, like live her life and come back, because nature took care of the child. Like actually the story with Anastasia in a nutshell real quick, like why she grew up, she actually didn't grow up, she grew up around her grandfather and great grandfather, but they didn't raise her because, you know, what happened to her mother and father was basically when she was like an infant, like couldn't even walk yet, a whole incident happened, I won't get into it, with her mother and father climbing a cedar tree, and they ended up getting struck by lightning and died. It's a very long story beyond the scope of this, but her parents died before she was like able to do anything. Like she was like a couple weeks old still. And her grandfather and great-grandfather saw her mother and father's bodies and saw little baby Anastasia just, you know, just chilling there. And then you would think that they would have taken her, you know, okay, now let's raise is our granddaughter or whatever. They walked away. They walked away and they let nature raise her because she was in her family domain. They knew that the nature of the family domain alone provided way more knowledge, support, understanding, nurturing, energy, love than they could ever imagine to do. There is no universal force. Supposedly what these things say is there's no universal force more powerful for a human being to connect to the divine aspects of creation than an intentionally culminated and born into space of love. They say that when you create this space of love, the whole ideal is it why the wedding rite like goes hand in hand with the creation of the kin's domain is because like pretty much once you're married, what do most people do? They make love and they create life after that. They want to have the establishment of the kin's domain because you want to actually conceive, hold out your entire pregnancy and give birth. That whole 9 month or so period, I don't know if it was the same 9 months back then, but whatever, the whole period would be within the kin's domain. And that would essentially establish a link between the earth and the divine to allow for basically a gateway of infinite reincarnation on the earthly plane. So you would basically gain physical immortality and you would allow yourself to connect with the elements of nature in a way that are otherwise absolutely impossible. They talk about a phenomenon in these books that's this big plasma of energy that could be as small as a microscopic particle or as big as the sun whenever it wants. And it's basically, they talk about it in I don't remember which book, but I don't want to go too much into it because it's a whole anomaly, but basically it's like a manifestation, like one of God's most potent manifestations, this giant ball of plasma-like electromagnetic energy that's able to move on its own consciousness. And supposedly this is actually what kind of raised Anastasia, was this God. It was God, basically, the element of nature as this big plasma energy. Example, they say, like, you know, Vladimir interrogates her grandfathers when Vladimir hears about that, when they're like, yeah, her parents died, so we just, you know, just left her, went on a walk, finished our day. And he was like, what? You know, who else, you know, what would you say to that? And then they said, you know, what can we compare to that space of nature? All the bears take care of her. She would sleep under bears in the, you know, this is Russia, so winter's cold. She would sleep under bears to be warm. Basically, all the animals would take care of her. All the animals and all the plants would basically like nourish her and stuff like that. but her biggest parental figure, literally, was this big ball of electric energy that, like, when she first took her first steps, and mind you, her grandparents didn't even know about this ball of energy. They never experienced it in their life. With Anastasia, is the first time, supposedly, that their culture, since the fall of consciousness and stuff like that, has seen this happen, that she would, like, start walking, she would get up, finally got herself up, and then she would take her first few steps away from, like, where she has been all this time, and she would fall, and his energy would, like, literally, it describes, reverse the effects of gravity only on the localized area corresponding to the atoms of her fall, and gently redirect her so that she fell, but, like, so gracefully that she just landed laying down. She would fall off rocks. I mean, imagine a little kid growing up in nature. How many times they, like, how many opportunities they would have to die and kill themselves hitting their head on a rock or something like that. Every time something like that would happen, this consciousness would supposedly step in and just, whoop, you're saved, whoop, and it's outside of time. So it's not like has to do all this stuff, it's able to be in multiple places at once, essentially, quantum superposition. So that's kind of how, Anastasia was raised. So that's, like, a different perspective on, like, here's when you think about, like, leaving a child, like, alone, like, anywhere, in any context. Like, where would that be? In a house? On a street? On a, civilization? Like we said, all this matter that's, like, taken living things, killed them to create, anything that's not breathing and living isn't God consciousness. So it can't step in to help raise a life. This pole here can't raise a child, but a bear can. Shit, even animals play their part. I mean, plants even play their part. But it has to be from organic consciousness. So when you're talking about, like, having more of a hands-off way of raising children, that's obviously not to leave your kid in the car and, the books say, you know what I'm saying? That's, like, in nature, in a cultivated, intentionally established family domain, to where you've set your intentions, you've activated the space with what you want it to do. Life is always waiting for our command, basically, of what we want it to do to contribute to the divine dream. You just have to actually do that with intention and exercise that intention for it to happen. And so, let's see, a little more things about child rearing.
You're gonna say about the birth, something about doulas. You started saying.
Just basically that, like, a lot of people think that, like, you're literally supposed to, like, never separate your child from you, like, fuck, pretty much ever, like the mother. It's like, that's, like, terrible child raising, to, like, leave your kid alone at all. But it actually promotes their accelerated expansion at a way unprecedented level. It allows them to create new thought connections independently. Because when like we said, the reason why birth even happens is because it's a continuation of the energy of love and inspiration that started all of creation in a way that improves upon it. So when you're trying to improve upon something, you have to let it do that on its own. That's not your role. Your role was creating it, not to make it better. Let it be better on its own, because that's what everything naturally strives to do. So by encouraging the, within obviously the specifications of intentionally cultivated plants, animals, loving space of nature, within that space encouraging the independence for children to pretty much learn on their own. That's, the main thing. And then the main role that, like, parents would have, rather than preaching to them, this is how we live, like, they just do it, they just live it, and that's what the kids see. That's the role that parents and society and the other humans around play in raising children, is them being the role models for the children to then naturally look up to. That's what always happens. Kids they're just gonna do what their parents are doing or what the older people are doing, whether they know it's good or bad. They're just I'm gonna just do that, So another thing I want to talk about children that I feel is very pivotal is a way for your children to be completely not only telepathic, but speak any and every language depending upon who they're talking to. So essentially, like, how Anastasia is able to talk to this guy. They talk in Russian, and obviously the books are interpreted, translated into English and stuff, but She don't speak Russian. She don't speak English. She speaks a different, like, you could say light language. That's kind of her actual verbal language, but she's able to speak Russian. She's able to speak not only Russian, but the exact Russian vocabulary that Vladimir's using. So here's how it works. She is able to, and this is what all beings are able to do, understand the energy behind what's being communicated, intuitively grasp the whole language, and then use that dialect. And how this happened, like, he asks her, like, you know, did basically her grandparents taught her that. That was actually something they did to teach her something. And they say it takes an average from around age 3 to age 11 of playing this, like, creating it into a game. You're not sitting your child down, all right, we're going to teach you telepathy today. It's a game. And then that's another thing that they talk about the child rearing. It's like things that, like, are educational, they make a lot of it fun in games. Because what do kids like to do? They like to play. So if you play with them in a way that actually has, like, a deeper wisdom to it that they can gain, that's one of the most ideal forms of teaching, is doing it enjoyably, you know, intuitively. A lot of this stuff is just intuitive. It's something you can intuit. But Anastasia said that her grandfather, her great-grandfather actually, would basically have something that they want to say. Like, let's say, for example, like, you want to say your dinner's ready. You want to say to them, dinner's ready, let's come in the house, or something like that. You look at them square in the eyes, and you feel in your chest and emit the energy of what you're trying to communicate, dinner is ready. But her grandfather would be like, nonsense, complete, just, you know, whatever came out type of thing. So, like, you know, the kid would be like, at first, what the fuck, son? Like, you know, what is that? What are you trying to say? And then, like, and then eventually, like, you know, he's like, oh, I'm just playing, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I'm just playing. Oh, I'm just playing. Don't say, like, oh, I'm secretly trying to teach you something, child. This is just a thing that, you know, like, oh, I'm just playing with you, you know? And then eventually, you know, you just go, oh, and then the kid's like, is dinner ready? And then it starts to trickle like that, and you do that. Supposedly you start around age 3, and it's typically, she says, it takes around age 11, could happen earlier or later, that they are able to understand the dialect of whoever's speaking to them. So Vladimir came up to her and spoke his Russian. But, you know, he's not a scholar with 7 PhD degrees and read a whole bunch of books and stuff like that. You know, he's just using, like, layman's terms and, you know, slang even and stuff like that. She's able to pick up on all of those intricacies of not just the Russian language, his Russian language, his vocabulary, the way that he articulates. That's the type of intuitive understanding that our children can be raised to understand. Not just speaking every language, but speaking the language of whoever's in front of you. So not just, like, learning every Earth language. Like, what if an alien from Dimension C-137 comes up, you know, speaks Gorbabadan to you? You know what I mean? Like, you can't learn all of it, but you can learn how to interpret whatever situation you're in to know whatever you need at that time. And, yeah, there's more I can say about that, but, you know, about, like, you know, Anastasia and the Vedic people, they don't, like, have all of this massive reservoir of knowledge. Like, they don't necessarily, like, Anastasia isn't so smart because she's fucking, like, has all this knowledge in, like, just, like, retains all this knowledge. She doesn't retain all this knowledge. She's able to access the source of all knowledge at will. So you don't have to retain all the knowledge in existence. It doesn't matter how much you know. It matters how you're able to tap into the source of where you can know anything that you need to know at any point of time. So that's kind of how she talks about knowledge and learning, and how she knows things, is that she, you know, she's like, I don't know everything. I just tap into that which does. And so, let's see. Yeah, so that's a little bit about child raising. Let's see if there's anything else I kind of want to. Like I said, there's so much more I could be saying about this stuff that I will in the future. But first I'll ask, is there any questions about child rearing? Anything you want to just talk about it, or? Yeah. Okay, keep chugging. What time are we at? How are y'all feeling in terms of break? You want to stretch, do anything for like 2 minutes or anything, or? I tried to do my best to structure this overview on like a consistent, a continuity. First there was there was unmanifest existence, and then there became the manifested earth and humanity, matter, and creation on a scale that we went into. Then we had the fall from Eden, the analysis, the supposed metaphoric eating of the apple, and how that brought us into the analytic way of being that started to kind of define what humanity is more like today. And then the Vedic culture of the people who lived during those times shortly after creation that were in tune with the elements and God and the divine to be able to manifest accordingly. And then we're going to get into the occult priesthood that brought us into the world that we're in today, and then our way out of that is pretty much how the thing flows. And then, so where we're at here is divine nutrition. I kind of already touched on it. There's not, we don't have to go too extensively here, but divine nutrition essentially, I think I want to pull up, here it is. Right over here. Yeah, so people in the, the Vedic times, they obviously didn't know any diseases. They didn't have any such things. They didn't have any distortions and toxicity that would lead to diseases and stuff like that. They would, remember I said earlier, one should eat as one breathes. And that's because at the exact moment that you're walking around in your kin's domain and you have an intuitive instinct to maybe grab, just say you have a grape tree, just one grape. You're not just getting a whole bunch of going ham, like just one grape, maybe three, just 3 grapes. In that exact proportion, you walk by, get like 3 grapes and just eat it and then keep going about your day. Supposedly when you create the establishment in this like literally quantum accurate way, you allow your actions to be directly in tune with your higher divine nutrition, so that not only were those 3 those 3 grapes may have been exactly what your body needed at that time of year in that proportion to that variety of the grape, if it was a purple grape, red, green grape, whatever. And because they say that I think it says right here actually, yeah, every berry, little herb, and piece of fruit has its own day, hour, and minute when it's the most beneficial to the human body, when it will complete the process of its growth in conjunction with celestial bodies. So they take into consideration, when you're establishing your kin's domain, they don't just think about what the best plants are for that climate and stuff like that. Obviously they think about those things, but they also go into what do these plants have to do with the interrelation of the heavenly bodies, and what astrological time, because we're talking about millions of years, you know what I mean, these beings that were around for such a long time, they'd be like, what epoch are we in to grow plants corresponding to this astrological time that we're in? And they take the stars into consideration, because everything growing on the earth is inherently interrelated with the cosmos and the cosmic center and stuff. So it says, by this time it will have taken into account the specifics of what lies under the ground and of other plants growing around it, as well as of the man that has bestowed his gaze upon it, and then evaluate and determine what his greatest needs are. And on that very day when it is ready to serve, man will honor it by its acceptance and allow perfection itself to become his food. There is so many layers behind the consciousness that nourishes us. These plants aren't just machines. They're beings that, when you look at a plant a certain way, I'm sure we all know about the experiments of how you talk to water influences the molecules with the snowflakes and stuff, how you do that with, plants are mostly water, same thing, humans are mostly water, same thing, it all corresponds. And plants, when you look at them a certain way, they're like oh, I'm making the best fruit for you, baby. Like, you know, this is your freaking apple. This is your tomato, you know, like I want this to be as nourishing as possible to fuel you to continue the divine dream. Like, all of it is the why everything was so harmonious was because it all had a common goal. Remember, in all the chaos, what brought the calm? When the predominant thought that was in each energy was that nothing is higher than the divine dream. Nothing is more important than conjoint creation and joy for all from its contemplation. You know, so that's, I say that in that emphasis because, like, literally we can argue today's world being that metaphoric time of complete chaos and chickens with their heads cut off and shit like that, and then how to, you know, get through that would be the predominant priority of the divine dream and purpose as a human consciousness rather than an individual level. And so the plants contributed to that. And in nature there are many plants that can even painlessly terminate a woman's pregnancy, like garlic, for example, oregano, the male fern, birthwort, and many others. And then also, on the other hand, there are plants capable of helping the fetus grow harmoniously in the mother's womb, which one should be taken in how much quantity is something anybody will, like, is something that nobody will be able to tell. Each individual body has their own interpretation of what is nourishing, is what is best, is what that vessel needs. Because when everything is grown from your toxins, from your genetic information, it is always giving you the peak of what you need. So those are my nuggets I'll share on divine nutrition. And then, so basically their ancient aloha spirit, I actually kind of already said that, I just call it that because it's like, you know, they naturally, like, don't hurt each other because they know that's hurting themselves and it's going to inflict pain about themselves. They don't steal from others because they know that that's just going to then eat something that's not going to harmoniously react with the body. They're not going to do things that would be like injustices or hurtful to other people because they understand their relationship with not just people, like plants. They wouldn't just go hurting plants because they understand that that's going to affect you, because we have our pristine health when we are in conjoint creation with divine, with the elements of nature. And when you know, kind of are an asshole, that's going to influence the dynamic in a way that influences you. So they just intuitively had that aloha spirit of just like kindness and like open heart and intuitive right action, I suppose you could say. So that is a little bit about the Vedic culture, the civilizations that were going on around the time that they said we were cavemen hitting our head on rocks and stuff like that. All this way beyond our scale of understanding things, their perfection of, you know, the creation that they would do. That was what their civilizations were kind of like. And so, mind you, this was just their predominant way of being, was this intuitively, naturally, organic, healthy living. But also remember that this is all like but this is after that original Adam analyzing the apple before he eats it. So there is still inklings of that consciousness in the civilization. It just wasn't the predominant energy. And as civilization started to go thousands, hundreds of thousands more years, you know, they started to reach a point where certain individuals started to grasp the comparison of speed of thought. One of the biggest things in this civilization is their knowledge of speed of thought. That's why you put your kid or any living being out in nature, it's going to increase your speed of thinking. It's going to allow you to accelerate the speed at which you can comprehend your reality. That's like one of the biggest things to being a conscious being, is your speed of thought. And then there are certain beings that started to have their own, because we live in a free will universe, all the diverse energies within. Eventually, these people start to have this perspective of, what if I had a higher speed of thought than everyone around me? what power would that allow me to have over others? I would be able to make decisions relating to everyone else before they would even know that a decision had to be made. Your speed of thought puts you ahead of the game, and that's what allows you to act in a way that like controls people, because you can do things that control them before they even know that that's happening, or before they even know that something could happen to control them. Like, you're just way ahead of them. So this is where the birth of these priests lineage supposedly originated, was back all these times ago. This was around medieval times at this point, when they were basically like, first what they tried to do was they were doing certain exercises and stuff to increase their speed of thinking. They were like, if we have a higher speed of thinking than everyone, we'll be superior, we'll be able to control them. And then there's actually a reason why. They weren't just like, let's be the biggest assholes, let's do that. Like, they actually had a different reason. But we'll get into it in a minute. But basically, like, they were at first going into their exercises to increase their speed of thinking. They don't go into the depth about that. But then they eventually realized that it wasn't the most efficient route. They realized that it would be a lot easier and a lot quicker, rather than increasing their speed of thought to be superior to everyone, to decline everyone else's speed of thinking, and then they just naturally are superior because they just haven't been dumbed down. So that's literally the method that they adopted. They started to really implement that method at the very first times in ancient Egypt. At the peak of ancient Egypt is when they first started to implement the action of that thought. Prior to ancient Egypt, they were just doing things to increase their speed of thinking, and they were already like getting an edge over people and starting to implement change and starting to implement, their control and stuff like that. But it was the time of ancient Egypt that they were like, alright, we just gotta dumb everyone else down, lower their vibration, lower their speed of thinking, so that we don't have to do anything. We just will always be superior. And then, man, let's do something to where we don't even have to eventually do anything. Let's create this system self-sustaining, so that this way of systematically dumbing people down and lowering their speed of thinking and thought happens automatically. And we don't have to sit here and do all these little things. We just set the system in motion and then let it do its thing. And so during the times of ancient Egypt, it's pretty intuitive. The pharaohs, just like today's presidents, don't actually have the power. They're the puppets of those who do. And that's how it was back in the time of ancient Egypt, was they started to gain supremacy over the pharaohs because of their knowledge of imagery. So we talked about like the Vedic age, how that's literally most of the million-year cycle. And then there's the image age before the occult age. The image age is understanding the importance of imagery, and like that's all the greatest leaders who ever existed, whether they were positive, negative, like the conquerors, the people who took land, all that stuff. Their biggest thing was their power of imagery. And they're like these people like Alexander the Great, like like all these people like going on quests. They were like, I have this vision to take all this land, to whatever the case may be. They dreamt enough, they visualized it enough to actualize it. So they realized that, just like today in our modern spiritual community understanding, it's common sense to anyone who's relatively awake, the power of visualization and how you can manifest things through visualizing your desired outcome and what you want to manifest and stuff like that. So these priests understood that, and they would like literally conjure up these spells, really, about like putting these priests, these pharaohs under their control. And then they also, prior to the pharaohs and stuff like that, were able to amount massive amounts of resources, connections, already a little bit of control over people's predominant consciousness and money and things like that, back to what it was back then, like gold resources and stuff like that. So they were able to leverage all of these different elements paired with their powerful sorcery of imagery to be able to pretty much control other people, control the pharaoh, put them in, like, they would get them in a hypnotized state to where they were impressionable upon whatever they would say to them. So they would basically, the pharaohs were like kind of zombified. They were just like doing whatever they told them, you know, one meeting to a next, one gathering to a next, one little appearance. I mean, you think this literally has gone on till today. Look at the president. Like, they're constantly going to a meeting, going to a conference, getting on a plane across the world to talk to someone at something, signing documents. Like, when do you see a president just chilling until their office days are done? You know what I mean? This acts like, so supposedly the whole thing with that is they put the person in governmental power into a hypnotic, susceptible state that's impressionable to whatever they tell them to do, they do. And they literally, the priests behind the strings, are the ones actually that are the pharaoh, but they're just using their body as a way to do it, be the face of it and stuff. We all know this. And the way that they would keep them in that state was that they wouldn't let them have their own time to think on their own. They wouldn't let them get out of the influence of this artificial information field. You know, think about it, like, you can really look at it as the presidents of today. They're constantly doing all those things, never have a spare moment to their damn self, really. And if they are, they're just like trying to actually just like breathe, you know, rather than like, you know, really. You think a president like goes and meditates and hits samadhi states to like see himself and like see, oh, what am I doing in all this? You know what I mean? Like, they're constantly doing things from one thing to another, and that's kind of how they keep them in that state of not questioning. Little fun fact here: it was actually a president. I want to remember the one. I want to say it was. Oh man, I don't remember which president, but it was a president not too long ago, a couple decades ago, that he actually did. Really bothering me, I can't remember the name right now, but one of the presidents, a well-known one at that, it was surprising I can't remember, but they actually, like, after World War II, I believe, if y'all know who was in office then, they actually took a period to where they went to like a ranch, like a family ranch that they had in Montana for like a whole month. And it was only a few, oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't after World War II, I forget the time frame, but they said it was only a few months after their presidency. So like after they just became president, just a few months after their presidency, they went into a ranch and like just basically took a month off as president and chilled in a family ranch and got themselves out of the artificial information field. And supposedly this was actually like a deeper energetic cause to World War II, was that the dark forces supposedly saw that, yo, this president, if he don't get off that ranch, he's gonna actually get out of our hypnosis over here. Because another thing they say about the occult energies and the dark forces and the elites and stuff like that is, when you are in nature, when you are surrounded by organic consciousness, you are, for the most part, impervious to the influence of occult energies, of these thoughts, subliminal programmings, all these types of things that are constantly in the collective. You are, for the most part, impervious or largely shielded, depending upon the vegetation, you know, all of the different factors. You know, it contributes largely, in many cases, in a kin's domain, like completely 100% you're immune to the influences of dark energies, dark forces, and things that are trying to manipulate and control you for benefit, detrimental reasons. And so, salute. When this president, you know, did this, they kind of were like, this isn't okay, and then they put a lot of things in motion that contributed towards an influence. I'm not saying it's the reason, but it is a contributing factor towards the unfolding of what we experienced as World War II. Was this president that like was going to like really change things, and then they were like, no, we can't have that. Like,
Was it Roosevelt?
no,
John Adams.
no, I want to say it was Bill Clinton, but like I swear I'm gonna like, man, I don't want to erase this masterclass afterwards. Like, if y'all remind me, I will find it. It's in the book I was just reading too, not too long ago. But yeah, so that's the occult priesthood, and that is essentially how they had controlled many of the governments, and started to, I mean, imagine you have the pharaohs, and then after the ancient Egyptian times, supposedly the whole story with the Jews was that they told the Jews, like, after ancient Egypt kind of fell, Moses was supposedly under the, this is what the books say, was that actually, like, Moses led a bunch of Jews out of Egypt, and I'm not entirely sure if Moses himself was under the influence of these entities, of these priesthoods or whatever, but there were entities who most definitely were direct lines of the priesthood themselves. They weren't actually priests. They have the high priest, like there's 6 main priests, 5 of them are priests, and then there's the high priest, the other 5 priests, and then there's like this word that starts with an L that was like their direct ambassadors, because they would never act themselves physically. They would be completely in the shadows always, and that's how most people never knew them. And then even that direct group was still mostly in the shadows, but they would actually go and like do certain legislative acts and things like that. And these beings that were like directly in the, like at the top of the hierarchy of the priests and the occult enslavement controlling plan and shit like that, 2 of them or 3 of them were with Moses when he led a large group of Jewish people out of ancient Egypt. And it was supposedly like my number's off here, either 4 or 40 years of a trek. I think it literally was like a 40-year trek, actually, that they, like, it was a generational thing that they, because this is ancient times, they didn't have cars, man. They, like, when they wanted to leave a country, it could take 40 years, and they would, like, they went on this trek for that long, supposedly. Like I said, it might have been 4. I feel bad if I messed that up, but around a long amount of years. And then during that entire time, while they were walking, these direct descendants of the priests, or the direct hierarchy of the priests in the line, the lineage, whatever, they were like programming the Jews with this dogma of like, you Jews, you're the special ones. You're the divine ones. No, everyone else is second to you. You're the one people needs to be worshiping. You need to create this whole way for people to worship, all these different things, and really conditioned them. And I don't need to go too much more into that, but that's how kind of like what spread into a lot of like that even plays a part as to why Hitler hated Jews so much, was because he actually understood what the priests did to the Jews and how they used the Jews as a way to kind of like be another front, like how they used the fucking pharaohs and used the presidents, like they were using another ethnical group of people for their purposes and stuff like that. And so the other thing is that the way that trying to see the way that I could flow this into the next thing. Basically during this time, they started to implement from the pharaohs, they were gaining power, they were gaining influence, and then from the Jews and the religions, they were actually starting to go around after the Moses led them out and the Jews and stuff like that. That's when they started to initiate the proposal of building churches and temples and stuff like that. And then at certain parts of the world, the predominant thing was Christianity. And they would tell people, look, to understand God, you got to build these 4 walls with this specific instruction. You got to praise him there. And you do that as like your only way to worship God. It's within these walls. And the original temples were actually ways for them to extract the energy. They were built in such a way that the priests would actually gain energy like an antenna from all of the churches, where all of the churches that they were having people do this ritualistic prayer in their exact method. They were telling them exactly how to send the energy out. They were actually able to sink into the receiving end of that energy and siphon everyone's life force. And that's kind of where the whole concept of churches supposedly came about, was a way for them to siphon people's life force, gain their energy, literally take everyone's life force and not give anything at all in return. And they would use all of that to their power, to their magic, and it would power the visualizations, their images. It would give them more energy to expand their influence, and you kind of get the visual here. And so they were doing this all around the world. They were going into every different major part of the world, and they were saying, hey, you like God, right? Don't you want to like be connected with that dude? Well, the only way that you could do that is with these walls between you. And they were, they would be more convincing. They were very persuasive and stuff like that. I forget exactly how they say it in the book, but that's what they would propose. They would say you need to do these specific rituals in a specifically designed building that you have to go to at specifically designated days, so that they would know, like, if they're like, oh, it's Sunday, time to go with our receivers, you know what I mean? Like, they would know when people were sending out energy for them to siphon it. So that's how they were able to do that. It's not like they build the thing and then it automatically goes to them. They would have to intentionally be on the receiving end of it. And so this predominantly pretty much took over like everything, because what this ended up doing was, it was, at this time they were approaching people who were still in the divine Vedic way of life. They were looking at people and coming up to communities of people who like all the lifestyle I was describing, like these like pretty perfected freaking beings, and they would just walk up to them and be like, oh, you want to know how you can improve your perfection? You want to know how you could get deeper with God? This is what the prophet said, all these different things. And then, there would be those individuals who, they were also very open. And also you got to think, and this is one of the biggest things that puts us in the most powerful position like ever in humanity today, was that back in all these ancient times, this was their first time experiencing, with these priesthood, the whole situation, this was their first time experiencing distortion to this extent. So they didn't know how to react to it, besides like, let's be distorted, let's do it, I'm gonna trust you, let's do it, you know what I mean? So that's kind of how they were. So you would think, how could they fall? How? Because they trusted, because they had open hearts, and they didn't think that anyone would propose such a fucking ridiculous system. Like, truly. And so they started to basically influence people, and then as they started to take people out of their kin's domain and bring them more and more into these temples, into these churches that they would extract their energy, they would build more structures like that. And that's when we started to see more civilization, walls, buildings, things like this, the inanimate matter. They would basically align them more with inorganic artificial consciousness, to where they would be building things and doing things that God source consciousness beings wouldn't even think to do. They were essentially corrupting their consciousness in a way, bringing them away from their true nature, and then they were acting in a way that was just to the design of the priests. And what do the priests want? The priests want control, because their speed of thinking will be quicker. What did we talk about with how babies learn from nature? You want people's speed of thinking to be low, keep them away from nature. So they're like, we got to build more structures to keep people in these walls so that they're separated from the source of their omnipotence. And they would like do that, implement that sequentially, and they primarily took over all of the different parts of the world in the ancient world, with the exception of Russia, is supposedly what these books say, is that during all those times, during all the epochs, all these thousands of years, that this that we've currently been in this kind of occult age. It's been 1,000 years and stuff like that. Oh no, it's been around longer. There's talking about in terms of the million-year cycle. But during all of these different shifts, during all of the wars, during all of the different religions, during all the philosophies, all the different politics of the world, secluded from all of that, when you really look at a map and see how big Russia is, it's not hard to see why. That thing is like unlike any country or continent. That thing is huge, all filled with nature. The taiga is like immense there. It's unfathomable. It's like a whole earth alone in Russia. It's huge. So like within Russia was where direct descendants of this divine lineage, all the way rooting back from the time of Adam and Eve and the Vedic cultures and Lilith and all of those lineages, the only surviving link purely, like undistortedly with all of the remain teachings of all of it, supposedly live in Russia, and they called themselves the Vedrus people because they were, you know, the Vedic people in Rus, the Vedic Russian people, the Vedrus is what they would call themselves. And so for the last like hundreds or thousands of years, Russia has been the only place where this civilization has kind of like stayed alive and stayed pure. There's been other places to where obviously its descendants are everywhere, but it got, you know, compromised by the artificial consciousness structures and all that type of stuff. And so, yeah, they were trying to basically take over Russia, but they couldn't. And even to this day, and so that's where the people who the information of these books come from, you know, is they're in Russia, in Siberia and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure still to this day, even. Just good luck finding them in all that nature, you know what I mean? People have tried, but people actually have. They actually go in, book 2 is all about, like, in the first book, he actually said her, like, legit location, like, how to get there and shit. Then people actually approached her, and it was just, that's a different story for a different time. But, so, the occult priesthood essentially can be prevented from organic consciousnesses that understand what forms the occult can come up in. So I mentioned we're in a very powerful position right now as humanity because our future generations aren't going to have to go through that bullshit, because we're going to be able to tell them, like just be on the lookout for occult forces that exists. Like, we know that exists to take precaution against it in the future. And that's a luxury we weren't admitted back then, because, you know, had to experience it to learn and grow and stuff like that, live and learn. And so that's and essentially the occult priesthood where we're at. And here's one last thing I'm going to say about the priesthood that just directly from these books, which is a pretty interesting perspective to take, is that today's priests, the priests of today and stuff like that, aren't necessarily as, like, maniacally evil as you may think. Supposedly, they say that after the great-grandfather died, Vladimir had a conversation with the grandfather, and then he told him this. The grandfather said one day he overheard a conversation between his father, one of the priests, Anastasia's great-grandfather. He overheard a conversation between that priest, his father, and the high priest. And this was shortly after the first Anastasia book came out, because Anastasia's whole big dream that she says is, like, you know, her dream is to transport all people through the dark forces window of time. That's the sentence that she says in all the books. Like, you know, she wants to transport all of Earth's people through the dark forces window of time. So basically, like, outside of the enslavement of the dimension of time, she wants to liberate them from that through the radiating feelings of love, joy, pleasure, and passion that she encodes within the words she says to Vladimir, that he then writes into the books and distributes to the world. That's kind of where her thought process is at, and she says it in the books very blatantly. She doesn't hide a single damn thing, knowing all the dark forces are tuning into her like a freaking radio receiver. And the thing is, when the first book came out, and actually I think even after the second one, the high priest actually communicated with you know, the high priest, and then he said, yo, your granddaughter, yo, like, you know, her speed of thinking is unlike anything you've ever seen. Because remember, the priests usually didn't increase their speed of thought, they only decreased everyone else's. So these aren't such powerful beings. They've just created a system for so long that acts on its own, and that's where the momentum is at. But the people behind the whole shebang, Anastasia says straight up, because Vladimir says all this, you know, when he understands that Anastasia is actually way more powerful than any of the priests, including the high priest. She could kill him right now in an instant. And Vladimir says, like, you know, yo, why don't you take out that motherfucker? You know, like, do it. You know, goddamn, the greater good, for goodness sakes. The amount of suffering, the pedophilia, the drug, come on. There's ever justification, you know? And then she's like, I could take him out right now if I wanted to. Then someone will take his place, someone smarter and stronger, and then they'll just continue. You know what I'm saying? You got to go at the root. He's not even a root. You know, they're just created a system that has all this momentum. And when the communication came through from the high priest to the great grandfather of Anastasia, he basically said, the grandfather said to the high priest, he said, I know that you're tapping in. I just want you to know that her plan does not directly interfere with any of ours. And they actually propose a way that we can gain even more power and speed of thought. And then the high priest is like, oh, I'm listening. And then, like, you know, it talks about the kins domain, it talks about the family domain, and how you can increase your speed of thought. You can have a link to incarnate physically, embodied immortally in the physical as long as you want. You live through your generations and stuff like that. You're saying all these things, and then the high priest is like, if she's all conscious and powerful and all, why is she putting that information out in the open for anyone, including us, the big bad wolves? She's cool with us doing this, you know? And then the grandfather said, yeah, she would be 100%. She is cool with that. She would be more than open to allowing you to establish a kin's domain. And then the high priest like, that would mean we have more increased speed of thought. But also the grandfather says that Anastasia pointed out was that it would also purify your consciousness to where, yeah, you'd be thinking at a speed of thought, but you wouldn't be a big asshole anymore. You know, you would actually be doing things that are benefiting the earth. And so she puts this out for anyone and everyone to gain this. And all of the priests supposedly recognize that she is far superior, like next level, far superior to any living priest that still runs this world. They don't run the world. The system their ancestors did really does. They're just the ones sitting on the thrones of that. And like, which most of it isn't thrones. They say the high priest is just a dude living in an apartment with a family. Nobody would even imagine. That's what they say he is. And then he has all these multiple millions of people able to like respond to his will, but not a single one of them know who's giving them the orders. And like, he spends all his time in isolation, but homie has a wife, has an offspring, you know, lives in an apartment, watches TV, like literally like same thing as any other human you would be walking around. That's why nobody knows who it is, you know. And so that's the occult priesthood. And so bringing us into like I've already kind of talked about the speed of thought, but basically the Book of Kin real quick, because I do want to get to the family domains. We're already like, you know, just hit 6. So the Book of Kin is how to preserve and channel the ancestral teachings of your lineage. It's essentially like a book of your family. This is something that was also in the Vedic culture. This was just something that they would all do. They would write a book for their children. A book imbuing within them all of the teachings of their time. All of the things that they would want their kid to know. And there wasn't one Book of Kin that an entire civilization went off on. Each family had their own unique Book of Kin that was specifically created for their children. Not their neighbors' children or the ones in the future or the past. Their children now. And that would allow them to open up a channel for the ancestral teachings. Even today, Vladimir talks about, you know, because she says anyone could do it. Anyone could do it even today. It doesn't have to be back then. Anyone could do it. And then he says, how is anyone supposed to know the teachings of their ancestors, for goodness sakes? Like, we don't even know what 2 + 2 is over here. And then, like, you know, she's like, by being in the state, by doing the actual action of writing the book, you are energetically opening up to receive the channel to put the actual teachings of your ancestors there without even knowing it. Allowing it to spirit right, you know? That's how Vladimir wrote these books. Homie had, like, yo, if you really read the very first, like, they revised all the books, like, in a nutshell, I'll just say this real quick. Most of the covers, if you do look for these books, for anyone, most of the covers look something like this, like really artsy, and like, these are the original ones, right? But then they also have these with like the black cover and a simple design on them. These are actually the newer ones in the early 2000s that came out, like 2010s and stuff. These are like the revised version. These are like the raw original ones, translated straight into English and stuff. And then the original Anastasia, like, it's pretty rough reading some of the language sometimes because it's like, you know, the punctuation and stuff. he actually got a lot of hate on that. But then as the books went on, you know, he wrote more and more improved. But still, if you notice, like, reading the books invokes positive feelings. It actually says on the back of most of the books, I'm not sure if it said, it literally, like, their little catchphrase for this series is like, the more you read it, the better you feel. You know, the better you feel, the more you read it. Doesn't matter what the information is, although the information will keep you freaking expanding for years, but, like, you know, it's actually the energy behind the information, behind the combinations of those 26 letters that actually matter and stuff like that. So in that same spirit, writing a book with the feelings of love and inspiration, those big key elements right there, having those energies be the driving force to writing the Kin's domain, writing the Kin book, the Book of Kin, that's what's going to allow you to open up the channel to be able to teach your kids everything that you would want them to know, everything they need to know to thrive, evolve, and accelerate their speed of thinking. And most importantly, in today's Book of Kin, we're going to teach them about the occult. We're going to teach them about what our history was. We're going to teach them about what happened, how it happened, and how to prevent it from happening in the future, so that we don't have to go through the cycle. We learn as we complete each epoch. We learn through the devastation and through the destruction. That's why it's so beneficial to go through it now, so that we can learn it and then teach our kids the lessons. So today's Book of Kin is going to be having the information that you would want them to know, as well as the things that even in ancient times they didn't put in their Book of Kin. Because it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, it doesn't matter how old, young, man, woman you are, it just matters how potent your feelings of love and inspiration are. That's going to correspond to the potency and the accuracy of the ancestral teachings of your Book of Kin. So we went to the creation story, went into the beginning of everything, we went into how the Adam and the Eve and the apple and all that. We went to the ancient Vedic cultures, what their weddings were like, their child raising, the divine nutrition, the Loha spirit. Went into the occult priesthood a little bit. You know, like I said, just so much more that I could talk about. But, you know, that's in a nutshell. From the times of ancient Egypt is when they started to really put forth into motion their control over the world through imagery and through these occult rituals to be able to siphon people's life force energy. Through the life force energy, they converted it into the resources and all of the different manifestations they would need to literally control the world by the masses of people. And how we now are coming into a space to where the Great Awakening is here, and now more and more people are being in alignment with organic creation, like the whole ascension process. That you'll have to take my other masterclass that I've already done for the Lightworker's Guide to Re-Evolutionary Determinism, to talk about like what the ascension process and the whole aspect of it is. Like, with all of that context, we're now in the position to step in the footsteps of our ancestors, but in a way that they didn't even take, because now we've experienced the destruction of the occult that we can now take preventative actions against. All of this is all tied together through the practical way that you can actually like gain this immortality, this family domain I keep talking about. So like, I actually drew a little version of it right here, so you can get a little visual. So, like I said, those on the Zoom, you know, I'll be able to have a more in-depth video of this that I'll send to y'all in the future. But here we have what looks like a typical Kin's domain or something like that. Usually, obviously, much more detail, you know, obvious. I just gave y'all a little visual here. But so we got over here, first off, for the family domain, is the average is about 1 hectare of land, which is 2.5 acres, and you don't want it to be too small, because then you won't be able to have all of the abundance to be able to live year round. You don't want to ever have to leave your domain to get anything. If you go out, that's because you freaking choose to, but you shouldn't ever need to leave your family domain, because everything should be perfectly taken care of there. So it needs to be big enough to obviously grow everything you need. There's usually like hundreds of different things grown on a family domain. And then, yeah, 2.5, and you also don't want it to be too big. because then it's too much to upkeep. And then what a lot of people do, like we said earlier, like people who have massive amounts of property in today's world, what are they hire gardeners. They don't do it themselves, you know. And then you have someone else's, not your consciousness influencing your domain. You know, it's all got to be you. So you want it to be like the perfect little Goldilocks zone. There is like 1 hectare of land, 2.5 acres, and a little rectangle like thing. Obviously, shape don't matter, but just for the, you know, you want to create big communities, so it just makes it easy. And then, so you would typically have like a giant pond, giant source of water. You would just dig a giant hole in your domain, and then eventually rainfall would usually fill it. And then there's other ways to fill it and stuff, but you would have, it could take the proportions here. I tried to do the proportions as much as possible, although the garden is usually a lot bigger. They say sometimes a pond could even be like as big as like a quarter of your entire land plot. It's just the pond. And then like a third of your whole land plot can even be like the forest. You want to plant a lot of trees. Very importantly here is you want to plant a specific family tree that when you eventually shed your skin, you get buried under. They're like big on like tombstones as an occult ritual that keeps people in a purgatory state that doesn't allow their souls to be free. Essentially, those spirits that are in between worlds, the ghosts, the paranormal phenomena knocking over shit, that's because people look at her tombstone that says, "Rest in peace, Joe Walton Smith." Oh man, poor soul, so sad he's dead. Dead, dead, dead. That's all anyone thinks when they look at that. You're energetically holding them in a state of death, even though when you shed the skin, you don't die, you just continue life on a different dimension. Death is an illusion, death is just a concept. Life is eternal. We just see it from a limited frame of perspective that makes us think that. But when you look at it from an outside perspective, from the higher perspective, you know, everything continues. Energy can't be created or destroyed, only transmutated and changing form. So that being said, you want to create definitely a family tree, specifically that you intend. Usually people plant this tree way before they even start doing their family domain. You could get a little pot right now and make your tree. It could take hundreds of years to grow a fully grown tree. You know what I mean? Like, you want to start growing it, and then like when you do eventually shed your skin, you get buried under that, and then you take on the form of the tree. All of the different elements of your physical body decompose into the fertile soil of the environment, and then the tree uses that to grow. So all of your ancestors, all of your future generations are going to, your successors are going to look at that tree and see you in a form of life. They will associate your being in its eternal state with life, something alive. And they will also obviously see, like, look at this beautiful Kin's domain that, you know, this ancestor all those generations back, he was like, one day I'm gonna do this thing, you know, let's make it happen, you know, like, they see you in that light. So the tombstones, you never want to have like anything with any inscription on your tombstone. You don't want to, that's like a limitation, they say, and stuff like that. It's like very, you know, it's a lot to think about, how many tombstones are out there, how many, you know what I mean, like it's crazy, but that's what they say, is that whole tombstone is an occult ritual, and cemeteries are like the damned, pretty much, where, you know, the spirits are in limbo because they're trying to be free, but so long as, supposedly they say, have you ever seen the movie Coco? It's like, yo, this is like pretty like spot on with this stuff. Like I think they have it like either similarly or like inversed, but like still the same concept. In the movie they say, like, you know, the ancestors can come through around the time of Halloween as long as you remember them, and then when you forget them they can't visit anymore. But it's kind of like the other way around, when you kind of like either, just basically when you associate them with death, when you associate them as dead, when you see them as no longer alive, you manifest that for them. And so long as a disembodied spirit has anyone, if there's just one soul that still sees them as dead, so long as they see them as dead, they're in that limbo state until that person either dies or stops seeing them in that light or forgets about them. But regardless, when they just think about them and they're like, oh, Johnny's dead, man, oh man, Johnny's dead, he's no longer alive, that state, they're holding them in this limbo thing. So that's a little bit about immortality, and you do it through a family tree. You're able to basically embody yourself in the physical plane. Like, you create a waypoint, like a checkpoint. When a disembodied soul is wanting to incarnate on Earth, they need to wait for an opening. They need to wait for the opening of a mother's womb, an opportunity for them to embody and take on a human life. But through this kin's domain, you're able to create a permanent waypoint, no matter how many deaths or lives you go through, to be able to come back here whenever you choose, because you've put in the work in this plane to establish that gateway for yourself, to come in and out of this plane as you please. That's what our ancestors used to do. And so in a nutshell, you got the forest here, you got the pond, you got a garden with all the different things, you have like a little gathering area, and then you have like your little home. I try to draw a little log cabin type of vibe here. Big thing is they don't put a lot of emphasis on the home. They don't take a lot of space for it. It's not some mansion, because the thing is, your great-grandchildren are probably going to tear that shit down and build a better one anyway. Why put so much effort into it? This is the home. I mean, for God's sakes, you could just sleep in the forest. If you're in a beautiful place, just lay in the grass. You know what I'm saying? People sleep outside of the camp. This is what camping is. You can sleep anywhere here. This is all life. And I drew a little superb meditation rock there, just for fun. Yeah. So they don't put too much energy into the home. And mind you, all of this stuff actually has there's a 16-page document that anyone to either tune in into this recording on the Zoom, or all of y'all here physically, if y'all message me or come up to me after I'm gonna probably message me even if you're here, just because after this I'm gonna decompress. Like, send me a message, and then I'll email you if you want the document, a 16-page document, and also another link from their website they literally step by step tell you how to do a kin's domain, tell you how to build a house, tell you how to build the pond, tell you how to plant the forest, tell you how to consider everything. It's like superb detail. And in a nutshell, like, the little basic plan to establish a kin's domain is, step 1 is a general nature and plan for the settlement. So literally like this would be like step 1, creating a generalized, not final, just like vision, just like draw your little square, draw your little 12 acres. Oh yeah, and also I didn't say this, I want to say this real quick. This little grass here, the whole kin's domain is surrounded by a living fence. So you don't put up actual fences around, but also, there are critters and stuff that want to get in your plants, mess everything up, so you do want to have, like, your established space, but you plant a variety of trees, shrubs, bushes, grasses, high, tall grasses, and a combination of, like, kind of like you would imagine, like, if you look at this, right here, I mean, actually, it's a brick wall, obviously, on the side of that, but, like, imagine if this whole hedge was so thick that, like, you would really have to, like, push through to get on the other side of that. So you can actually plant a fence around your entire domain, and that's what they would do. They wouldn't, like we said, kill a tree to build a fence to make a freaking surrounding over here. They would plant things and create life in that way to be able to save the integrity of the kin's domain. And so that's step 1, is the general nature and plan for the settlement. Step 2 is determining the course of social policy. So what that means in a nutshell is, like, basically how you're going to go about doing it. There's like 3 main options, but like really 2 main options. That is that either if you're going to, like, go on your own accord and kind of do this yourself, like you and your beloved, whoever, your family and stuff like that, y'all want to do this on your own, or what these books actually are working towards, that they've been establishing in Russia. By the way, I can show y'all, like, I can send y'all links. Whoever sends me your email, I'm going to give you more than just those links I talked about. There's a bunch of stuff I can send just if you're interested. But there's videos of, like, this happened in the 90s into the early 2000s. Like, there's thriving Kins domains all around Russia with this exact rubric. Now they're starting to spread outside of the country. And that's why I feel like such a big, a role of like just. So I felt so passionate to share all this damn stuff because the United States as a whole needs to know this stuff so that we have the blueprint to go forth and have actual steps and like a way to do it, not just like, yeah, not just like a spiritual like, oh, it'll happen one day, like how you can actually do it and shit. And so the social policy, they actually proposed things to the Russian president that they got approved of essentially offering they basically offer to completely heal the economy of any nation through the establishment of a Kins domain, because it not only establishes obviously your pristine health, but your pristine wealth. Because just think about it, if you eventually all these trees are going to die out and you can chop down trees and plant more, just selling all of the wood valued at the like minimum level, like they go through mad math in the books and they show you like, and in some of the documents they'll show you like just numerologically speaking, being able to like share in community settings the wood, the resources, the things that you can cultivate from your land, like all of the different life that you're able to grow in your land and what you're able to do with that provides you with like, you never have to worry about finances if you play your cards right, because there's value in all of the different things that your land births. Your land is creating the value. All you have to do is be able to distribute that value and utilize it in a way that is producible, reproducible, sustainable. And so, yeah, so they say this to like the Russian president. There's like these letters they send to the president and stuff, and they actually got approved. They say every willing family is to be basically given 1 hectare of land, 2.5 acres for life, for like basically permanent use. And the big thing here with the legality of it is, like I said, in those documents there's a lot more you can read. The legality is a whole different class to talk about, but like it's land that can't be taken. It's not land that like, oh, this is yours and then like 100 years from now we could change our mind. It's like the legality behind it is such that this is an agreed upon understanding that the kin or the family, the direct descendants of those who originally was gifted this land, are eternally able to use this land. This belongs to these people, not the government, not the governing powers, not the priests, not anyone else besides this family owning that land. So that's why they say determine the course of social policy. Like, quite frankly, if you're gonna like kind of wait for the government to make these changes happen, because I am very confident within all of our lifetimes we can see these things start to come into more motion. If not fully played out within our lifetime, definitely make moves just by looking at Russia alone and what they've already been able to establish, and like the surrounding countries and how they've been peeping on their movement and stuff like that. And they say determine the course. Are you going to wait for government to kind of help you? Because not only, you also are able to get help from certain government officials and stuff like that to actually do the land and all that stuff. Or you're just going to say, fuck it, I'm a big boy, I'm going to do it my damn self, and I'm just going to, just start to establish it and start to build it and stuff like that, and figure out the legality and all that stuff depending upon the land that you're on, and play your cards, or maybe even just take the risk, just go in the middle of fucking nowhere and just make the damn thing happen, like truly. Like that's what I'm doing. And then general financial plan is essentially, obviously, like it takes, in the document I'll send y'all, there's it gives you a general list of like literally all the, I made it very simple with this little diagram. There's a diagram on there with way more things on it, and they say like, everything you're gonna need generally, and then you correspond that to prices and stuff like that, and get a ballpark of what type of money is gonna be involved, especially if you're doing this like out of your own accord and stuff like that. So, general nature and plan for the settlement, determining the course of social policy, how are you gonna go about doing it, just get that general image. General financial plan, understanding like generally the finances that are gonna be involved, and then Step 4 is choosing land for the domain. There's many different factors to take into consideration. Obviously, climate. You want it to be far away from highways and civilizations and man-made structures that don't allow you to increase your speed of thought and organic consciousness. You want it to be in a place that you feel right with. You know what I mean? Like, that feels best for you. That you want your freaking, I don't even say the importance of that. You want your grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren to love that you did it there. You know what I mean? Like, that type of perspective on it, and all these different notes, they go in depth and they have more reasons. I'm just brushing on because we're getting to the end here. And then after that point, once you've done all the basic planning and then you've chosen the land, now that you've chosen the land, have this basic vision, you want to basically redo this, and you want to create an updated general plan. It could be the same thing, but you want to just like update it if there's any little fine tuning and like things that, now you have the land, you're looking at the land you want to do this with, so you really want to update that. And actually, now that you have what you're looking at, there might be like a tree somewhere that you didn't know in your general plan. Now you know that that's there, and you can update it in your final one, so on and so forth. And then you're going to want to obviously have an updated financial plan. You're going to actually start going forth and like looking at how you're going to do it, the dimensions. If you need wood for a house, you can measure it out and calculate how much you're actually going to need. Since when you have the land, you actually can have an actual estimate of what you need for things rather than just visualizing it. And then 7, put it into action. Do it. You got the plan, you got the resources, you got everything you need, you understand how to do it. Now you can just do it. And what they actually used to do in like ancient cultures, in the Vedic culture that I didn't mention because I didn't like go in depth about this yet, was that like they would actually have kind of like help with like their domain. They would kind of have like people from their family and stuff like that, like all at once during like their wedding ritual. They would kind of have them help them like build the house and help them do like some of the laborious things like digging the pond and stuff like that. It would be a community effort. But like these days, now that we're actually coming back into this from this whole freaking epoch of this houses stuff, you know what I mean? Like that, we kind of, most of us are going to be doing a lot of it like, ourselves from scratch again, and then coming in smaller communities, building more and more and more. And then, as you would imagine, the future generations of those who do this, they're gonna all just know exactly how to create Kin's domains, know all the different things that was such a learning curve for us, and then they can help each other very easily and stuff like that. And there's just so many factors in it. If you go like out in the middle of just you and your family and make it happen, or if you're gonna gather a bunch of people, propose things like this, and create a community to then all do it collectively, combine your resources, do communal efforts like that. Like there's many different, that all goes with determining your social policy. That's a different thing with that. Your social policy is just how you're like literally going to do it, like how you're going to do it. What is your frame of perspective at and stuff like that. And yeah, so that's the family domain. There's a lot of benefits to it besides what I've said. Obviously, like I said, this whole class is just like me, like just getting the first wave of this out there, and like I'm gonna understand this stuff more just by having, I already do understand it more by having to explain all of it in this depth. But essentially the family domains is our way to immortality. It's our way to liberate ourselves, our future generations, every generation, from the occult influence. Remember, being in a space of intentionally cultivated nature, divine creations, allows you to be impervious energetically to occult energies, to susceptible manipulation, mind control, subconscious programming, all of these different subtle ways that our consciousness is attacked. You're impervious to when you not only create a space of nature, but create a space in nature that is intentionally cultivated with love, radiant feelings, and inspiration. Those radiant feelings go into the plants, into the animals. Also, another thing that I didn't draw here is like every domain has a bear on it. Every domain has a wolf on it. What you do is you get like a wolf cub, like a bear cub, at the same time that you have your child. have them all at babies at once. They grow up together, and there's no mystery to that. That's how nature is. You have a dog and a cat, you have them as little puppy and kitten together, they'll be best friends growing up. That's just nature. There's no mysticism behind that. So, they would have, like I said, there's a lot more details that is in it, that's in the document, so definitely do message me with your email if you want that. And that's pretty much it. That's essentially the main gist of what these books talk about. Is go this way here. Don't want to hurt a little avocado tree here. The creation of Earth. Earth was created from the unification of diverse energies. God, source, all consciousness, integrated all of the diverse energies within thyself to then, now that it has been integrated and cultivated within itself, it can now be outside of itself, cultivated and integrated in a harmonious and equal proportion. Created life, created the first matter, which supposedly was the earth, created earth, and then everything matter came from that, and humanity to experience the Eden that was created, a self-sustaining system to where it was perfect by design and nothing had to evolve, things didn't have to linearly evolve, things just were perfect in their true essential nature, just like us today. There's nothing we need to change about ourselves, no matter how much we've been in this occult, the health, the mentality, there's nothing we need to change about ourselves. We just need to accept that which we are, and then naturally our steps that we take will change ourselves when you don't focus on that and you focus on accepting what is. And then, all of the different energies outside of our universe wanted to understand how God's source consciousness created this universe so that they could replicate it, and they influenced Adam and Eve to try to understand the nature of creation, to try to make a more perfect creation. And that's when the whole, metaphoric eating of the apple, the animalism that led up until today, the development of the Vedic cultures and the people in the times around creation where they were in tune with the divine organic consciousness, how they raised their kids in a way that increased their speed of thoughts, allowed them to be independent beings, allowed them to be the continuation and the improvement of their love and inspiration of their parents, not a replication, not a duplication, not a lesser, not a toy of them, but an improvement upon each generation. Their wedding rituals, how all of that connected with, they automatically understood the feelings of love and radiance. That means you have an inspiration for divine co-creation of life, creating another human being and creating a family domain of a way for you to have that spawn point to be able to come back here whenever you want and take whatever form that you choose when you do that. Divine nutrition, one should eat as one breathes, to be able to not spend so much of your conscious awareness thinking about food, thinking about how you're going to cook it, thinking about how you're going to prepare it, thinking about what it's like eating it. Just as you live, you just eat as your body tells you how to. You don't think about what you shouldn't eat. You follow your feelings as to what you should and shouldn't eat. And your body in an organic environment will be able to only eat the things that it needs to grow and heal any illness, really. Divine Aloha Spirit, they don't do things that we think are conflicts, and it's just not intuitive to their culture. How the occult priesthood controlled since ancient Egypt the pharaohs to be able to control massive amounts of people, kept them in a zombified state so that they were constantly doing needless task from needless task. How that even, I didn't even mention it, but how that's not just the presidents and the pharaohs. I mean, shit, look at the school system, look at the jail system, look at the work system. Clock in, clock out, this time, block schedules. You're constantly doing things within a time frame to not be able to have your consciousness still and focused on creating your own thought, because then you'll be able to step outside of the influence of their artificial information field that they're hypnotizing and zombifying you through. And now from context of the whole Earth awakening, and I'm pretty sure people that have stayed this long in the masterclass know damn well what the awakening is and that we're part of it, and how now we are in a position to take into account all of the ways that our ancestors would live, replicate that again, in a way that we teach our kids through the Book of Kin how to not only be in tune with their ancestral roots, not only learn the cultures, the festivities, the education, the lifestyles, the enjoyment, the nutrition, the everything about the culture of their ancestors, but also what their ancestors had to go through in this horrible time that humanity has been fucking suffering from, and how we can prevent all of that from happening again, because suffering isn't a necessity to life. Suffering is a combination of pain and resistance. You don't need to have both of those in the combination that form suffering. Pain can be integrated without resistance in a way that harmonizes with divine will. And we can teach all of these things and way more through the Book of Kin to be able to spread all of the teachings and keep alive all of the teachings of our ancestors. And of course, ending it off with the Kin's domain of creating a intentional space of love within nature to immortalize yourself, heal yourself from all illnesses, allow prosperous health and wealth for your children in the future, and doing so in a way that is practically written in documents and shown legally how to even get legal assistance in doing such things in certain parts of the world and certain movements, to be able to one day have everyone around the world, if they don't already have one, they are granted a hectare of land to do this, to benefit the state, benefit the wealth of any nation. Eventually, as the consciousness improves, it's very practical to see this consciousness and all the leaders to be able to understand the significance of this. The priests themselves, the people, the big bad wolves of this whole thing, they didn't even want to keep perpetuating this suffering. This is the last thing I'll say before we really do end, is that the high priest actually did say in his communication to the great grandfather, like, yo, like, long story short, I'll say quickly, they basically recognized the immense disgust of what was created. Like, they were literally like, even if we wanted to stop, this system has been put in motion for thousands of years. It works on its own. It corrupts and distorts and brings suffering and pain all on its own. They're not even doing it anymore. They were just basically at the controller thing, just like staying alive themselves, you know, so that all the karma that their ancestors built up didn't fucking destroy them. Like, they were just in survival state. So, like, they are actually on board with the proposal of these Kin's domains, because they think they can increase their speed of thought. They can purify themselves, which they don't care about. They just care about the increased speed of thought. That's really what they care about. And also, it'll improve it'll be able to undo the suffering that has been created for countless millennia. They actually say, as a quote in the book, the priest says this, because of the power of this woman Anastasia and her vision, and, you know, she's literally the direct conduit from all this shit, all the direct documents and all that. Like, it came through, like, her channeling a lot, and then all the readers of these books creating them on their own and reaching out to governments on their own, and, you know, spreading the vision like that. This girl Anastasia and all of these potent, like, directly from the ancestral times, like all these thousands of years later, being able to be resurfaced in such a luminous, clear, apparent, obvious light, can undo what would take the priests, if all the priests decided one day, like, we're gonna fix this fucked up system that we did. It would take them thousands of years to undo all of it. It could take Anastasia a few, like a decade type of thing. Like, they even said so far as, like, if she really want, like, a year type of thing. That's, you know, that's just a number to paint a picture here of, like, the power that we actually have at our disposal here to be able to make this happen. This isn't some far out in the future vision. Well, here's what I'll say about it, is it's as far out in the future as you associate it to be. If you see it as something that's far out in the future, it will forever be there. And if you see it as something like, this is something that's in alignment with me, this is what I'm here to do, this is what I'm here to share people about. And my big thing is that even if you're not about to start creating your own family domain right now, even if you're not doing it right now, if you're planning on doing it, whatever, like, if this stuff resonates with you, sharing these ideas, sharing this consciousness, sharing this illuminescence, because the more that we spark these feelings of radiance and remembrance within one another, the more that we naturally get on the line of our higher selves. Our higher ancestral lineage works through our spirit when we're open enough. And how we get each other open is through those feelings of love and inspiration. It's so vital to have those feelings be the predominant energy in your field. And all this stuff happens naturally. And one day, you wouldn't have had to take this class. You wouldn't have had to hear me spit all this stuff. You would know all this stuff because most of us already knew a lot of this stuff. You know, it's intuitive. But, you know, because it's all inside of us. So, it's a very out there perspective of creation and, you know, our role in things and what we are capable of. And that's it.
Yeah, brother. That's fine. Yeah.
So we just want to tune in. Same way we closed it in, brought it in, same way I'm going to be closing out, giving gratitude, thanks, appreciation, and receptivity to all the ancestors. And that is going to be basically closing the ceremonial space of this. I consider this ceremony of sharing the information because this isn't me, this is just me, you know, doing what we all do. And but then we could all chill, you know, if we want to chill, vibe, have some more questions and stuff like that. And, you know, but to close actual space, we'll do the 5 ohms for creation. So I think we begin to rub our hands together. Once again, always tips of the fingers and the palms of the hands, accelerating that life force energy, closing the eyes, and while you're rubbing your hands together, focusing on integrating all that has been shared, integrating all of the energy, inspiration, life force energy, and wisdom that has been embedded into your consciousness, fully soaking it into your heart center to be fully received by your spirit. Bringing your hands now, pressing them gently together into the chests, thumbs on the sternum, arms nice and parallel, shoulders relaxed. Find your center. Take a deep inhalation. May the power of this Om liberate all beings to the north. Breathe in. May the power of this Om liberate all beings to the east. May the power of this Om liberate all beings to the south. May the power of this Om liberate all beings to the west. And with the power of this final Om, may all beings everywhere be liberated from the veil of samsara. exhalation and hold it at the top. Lock the breath, squeeze the Mula Bandha, raise the life force energy, and focus upon the radiant feelings of gratitude, love, appreciation, and wholeness within your hearts. This green energy radiating, expanding through one another's consciousness, slowly releasing the breath, recycling back into the roots. Mahalo, beloved sacred family. I honor you. I appreciate you. I love you and support you for being here today, for following your heart-centered guidance, for following where it is that your spirit navigated you towards manifesting yourself to, for following the path that is not the easy path, that is the path that is true, that is the path that goes through all of the density, all of the lies, illusions, and occultism that has been embedded within our lineages for millennia, going through all of the shadow, going through all of the light, integrating both together and finding wholeness within all manifestations of reality, recognizing ourself as the pillar of all that is, the creative potential of all that is, the love, wisdom, compassion, understanding, and strength of all that is. We bring forth all of these diverse energies of creation into one integrated aspect of ourself, aligning our physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies in one unified state to be a conduit of the love and inspiration that birthed everything in creation. I love you all, and may Source be with you.
So it is.